Let me know when you're on. Good morning. It's 10 degrees out this morning and it feels like spring. When you come the other morning, I went to the office and it was 23 below and truck was a little bit stiff, and so today feels great. And thanks for coming out this morning. I want to take a little bit of time and introduce my staff so that you know who they are. Andy Rosberg. Andy's going to speak about P&C this morning. Matt Melberg, he's my partner. My son Matt Larson. Craig Schmaling back there. Dave Schwolp. Dave is out of Cottonwood, Minnesota, and he works for me. Andrea Klatke is our Dressel agent. We bought an agency a couple years ago, and she works out of her home in Delano. And then Lisa is back at the office taking care of that. So, and Lisa's kind of the main cog, you know that. So anyway, I always think that when you take your time out in the day to come and be at a meeting, you want to take something home with it so that it was worthwhile. So I think we've got good things today that you'll learn something and it'll be worth your while. So with that, Andy, you want to come on up?
Morning. When we first were putting this meeting together, Dave and Matt and everybody, and they said, well, we're gonna save the best for last, and then they asked me to go first. And I thought, what's that all about? But I'm not gonna take a lot of your time here so that you can get to what you all came here for, and that's crop insurance. But to speak a little bit about the fire and wind, and nowadays they call property and casualty, same thing. But it used to be all fire and wind, and now they call it property and casualty. And to talk about coverage versus premium, and you want one or the other? Well, you want them both. You do, you want both. You want to get the coverage that you need for your farm at the lowest possible premium you can get. And that's your agent's job. And to do that, you need to explain, when you sit down with your farm insurance agent, you need to explain your business to them. Because they don't know. They might know a little bit, but it's important that you explain your business, farm, to them so that they can match your farm with an appropriate company. And nobody knows your business better than you do. So, you know, if you only deal with premium, you think that is all I'm interested in is just premium. Most of the time, those people have never had a loss. You know, they've never been taken care of. And if you've had losses, then maybe you sway towards the coverage part, but you got to do both. You got to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck and that you match your farm, again, with the insurance company. If you're living on an 80 and you rent it out and you've got a tractor to push snow and you rent the bin site out to the neighbor, you don't need coverage for your combine. You don't, even though you don't need that. You don't need rental reimbursement, things like that, and that's part of the matching up with the company. If you're farming 3,000 acres, questions to ask your agent. If I suck a fence post through my combine, am I covered? You don't want to find that out after the fact. You want to know that going in, yep, you're covered. If you've got a $500,000 grain complex and a tornado comes through, my dryer's gone, can I ship my grain to the elevator and get it dried? Am I covered for that? If you tip a trailer over in the ditch where your hired hand does, is the grain covered? Or is that just, am I losing that? Those are all questions to ask. Rental reimbursement, again, back to the combine. If you suck a rock in your combine, can you go rent a combine? Will the company pay for that? It's good to know that beforehand, not after the fact. And those are good questions, to ask your agent. You don't want to, at the time of a loss, have your agent say, when you tell them what happened, have them say, that's the first time that's happened. I don't know, well, we'll see what we can do. You don't want that. You want them to say, hey, we'll take care of you. Yep, you're covered. This is how it'll go. This is what'll happen. Do losses hurt? Yes. People ask me that all the time. Well, if I have a whole bunch of losses, is that going to hurt? Well, yeah, sometimes it does, depending on what they are. If they're weather related, not so much. Losses do follow you. The first thing, if you come in and say, I'd like to maybe have you quote my farm with other companies. The first thing those companies ask us is, well, send me the loss run. Send me all their losses. That's the first thing, and then they're going to look at that, and sometimes right there they'll say, nope, or, they'll rate it high. Another thing that I think is really important, and not so much to talk insurance all the time, but is to stay in touch, visit with your agent. And an agent to do that to you, not you being the one that's always having to call, but just talk to them, not about insurance. Talk to them about something else. Call them out of the blue. Have your agent call you. Hopefully he does that once in a while. Maybe you're talking fishing or whatever. What that does is it spurs them on when you add something. Say you add a tractor. If they've been talking to you a little bit, it spurs them on. They're going to call you to add that. But stay in touch. Review your policy. The smaller companies, which we have a lot of at our office, losses, they probably don't want me to say this, but losses have more effect with the smaller company. They do. The bigger companies, they can take that hit. One of our bigger companies is Nationwide, and they've been really good. They just write checks. Loss happens. Their claims history is really good with that. That's about all I have here for property casualty. Review your policy. It's really important because especially in the spring and the fall, when you get busy, stuff can slip through. So thank you, and I'll hand it back off to Matt here.
Perfect, thank you, Andy. When you talk about things that can happen on your farm, probably 4 years ago, we're not going to say who did it, but it might have been me. I was taking a combine down doing some end rows, and there was a steel post in the fence line, and I might have got it caught in the head. And it caused quite a bit of damage. Took a clutch out, took the gearbox out, it was probably 10 grand by the time we're done. Had Nationwide took care of it, going pretty quick. So renew your P&C insurance. Next up, I got Jared Hendrickson. There is some crop insurance changes this year. One with Prevent Plant that's kind of interesting. Hopefully Prevent Plant is not a word we ever utter again around here, but we've had 3 years since 2013 where we've had it. So Jared's gonna go through some of the crop insurance changes for 2021.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Yeah, like Matt said, we have some changes for 2021, not a lot of big changes. So this is gonna go relatively quickly, so I'll just hit the highlights in this area that pertain to us here. Like Matt said, Prevent Plan changes, some really favorable ones. So this is just a quick overview. Prevent Plan, new ECO coverage. I know Mark's gonna get more detail on that later on in the presentation, so I won't steal his thunder very much. Quality loss option, another nice feature if you're qualified for that. And then there's some yield exclusions for 2019. And then some other, if you're a BFR, beginning farmer rancher, veteran farmer rancher, there's some nice changes there too. And then some quality loss adjustments as well. Okay, so the quality loss option, what it does is if you had a notice of loss filed for a quality loss, what you can do is you can use the pre-harvest loss instead of the post-harvest loss. So really what it amounts to is it can raise your APH. So you get rid of that quality loss on the back end that you use on the front end yield. But you do have to have a notice of loss filed for that year. So that's really the first qualifier. You don't necessarily have to have an indemnity paid of that year, but you just have to have a notice of loss. So that's some of the things it qualifies for: following numbers, test weight, grading issues, defects, those type of things. The next thing is what it doesn't qualify for is moisture and foreign material. That's probably the number one question I get is, does it qualify for moisture? No, it does not. And it is available on these crops in this area. There are some more crops it does qualify for, maybe if you farm in other areas as well. So you might want to check with the folks here if you farm in other areas. Not available on CAT coverage. And if you select it, you have to select it by March 15th. And you can opt out of it by the production reporting date of April 29th. Okay, so if you choose to elect it by March 15th, it does boost your APH. It will cost you some more premium, but you can opt out of it by April 29th. Okay, the other thing is ECO. Mark's going to talk about that later, so I really won't steal his thunder, but it's basically SCO 2.0, is what I like to call it. And really what it does, it gives you some area coverage up to 95%. I'll let Mark talk about that later. If you are a dry bean grower, they expanded master yields in Minnesota for 2021. So that's a nice feature if you're growing dry beans. And then also in these particular counties, they added dry peas to Blue Earth, Clearwater, Faribault, and Norman counties, dry beans to Clearwater and Goodhue, and then processing beans to Houston County. Tea yield rate changes, usually every few years they update the tea yield and the rates, but this year they did it for these crops: dry beans, soybeans, flax, grass seed, oats, rye, sugar beets, and wheat. There are some more on the list, but this pertains to our area. So if you have enterprise by practice, irrigated, non-irrigated, they made some changes to where if you look at a flow chart, I didn't put it on here, but it would expand all the way across this whole wall. So there's a lot of scenarios they could fall into, but they give you some more options when it comes to enterprise unit by practice. So some nice changes there if you qualify for that. And then just as a reminder, if you grow dry beans, and last year, here's the dry bean harvest prices for 2020, black, dark red, pea, and pinto. Okay, so Prevent Plan changes. So I don't think, hopefully we don't have Prevent Plan ever again, like Matt said, but really what they do now is if you are a new producer, they allow you to use 2 years to use the intended acreage report. So previously it was just 1 year, now it expands into 2. So a nice change there if you're a new producer. And then make some clarification with some cover crop. So there's some rules there around cover crops and Prevent Plan eligibility. So they did just make some clarifications there on that. And then they expanded the 1 in 4 rule, which is planted and harvested and insured one of the last 4 years. It's always been, it's been a rule in Minnesota for a long time, but in states like Wisconsin, it's new. So if you farm in other areas, you might want to check on that or keep that in mind. Okay, so bullet point number 4 down there. So this is a big one, I think, is really what it does is gives you eligibility for prevent plant as your first crop that you intended to plant. So for example, as long as you meet the 20/20 rule, 20 acres or 20% of the unit, and you claim prevent plant corn, as long as you intended that, you will qualify for prevent plant corn. In the past, you planted 1 acre of soybeans on that prevent plant corn acres, it is now prevent plant soybeans. So that is a really nice change going forward. So the big thing is, there is language in there that says you have to intend to grow that crop. So just keep that in mind. But a really, really nice change there. Makes a lot more clarification. Okay, VFR, beginning farmer, veteran farmer, rancher. So the big thing that they changed here is they allowed, if you do qualify for beginning farmer, rancher, really what you get some, a little bit of a break on premium and fees and things like that. But if you qualify, now you can obtain land from a producer just as long as you have history of that crop. So there's 3 qualifiers here. You either have to physically grow the crop or physical involvement in growing the crop or decision making. And then the other thing is you have to have history of that crop. And then with permission of the previous grower. So just one nice little tweak there on VFR, if you qualify for that. Okay, and then one thing that was way overdue as far as corn appraisals go for maturity line weight method appraisal, they updated the yield factors. I don't know when the last time they did this, but it's been a long, long time. We have much better yields than we did years ago. So they finally updated this. So this is just kind of for your information. So if you ever run into this, it'll benefit you in this situation happens to you. And that is the really quick down and dirty of the updates. I know Mark's going to talk about ECO, SCO a little bit more later. So that's back to Matt.
Okay, so not a lot of changes, some changes with the crop insurance. Prevent plant number 4, that one was huge. I guess give a shout out right now. This is new for us. We've never put an online meeting out in the past. As you can see, we're doing the COVID rules here. Tables are spread out. We're doing a Zoom meeting right now. We've got 46 people, I think, online right now, and it's streaming to YouTube. Kind of a neat thing. See, Matt's got a little control center up here. That's what he's doing there, making sure nothing goes haywire. So next up, I got Ken Ripley. Ken works with FMH. He's also a farmer. And he's going to talk about ARC and PLC. If you have not been into FSA yet, you have till March 15th to sign up for one of these programs, and he's going to give you some insight on how they work.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everyone. You should have a copy of my slides in your handout here as well. So let's jump into it again. Like Matt said, I farm also down by Blue Earth, Minnesota. So I'm in the same boat as you, having to make these decisions at FSA. I'm just going to try to help simplify it because it's really going to be more of a coin toss this year than probably anything for you. As you'll see with my presentation. Just a refresher. So at FSA, obviously you've got farm shield numbers. Every farm shield number you have to determine if you're going to go into PLC. Oh, maybe the laser's not working. Is it this right here? Nope. No, it's advancing the lasers.
Oh, there's no laser.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
All right, misunderstood. Okay, so you have to go into either here. There we go.
There, try that.
Perfect.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you very much. We have to go into either PLC or into ARC at the FSA. So if you do ARC, you have a couple options like we've had in the past. You've got ARC County and you've got ARC Individual. If you decide to go into ARC County, you have the chance to have a difference between your crops. So if you've got corn-based, soybean-based, you could do PLC on corn, for example, and County ARC on soybeans. But if you do ARC Individual, all of those crops, your base crops for that farm number have to be into ARC Individual. So keep that in mind. But if you choose PLC, then that opens up the opportunity for you to choose through crop insurance, the SCO, which we'll be talking more about here in a little bit.
So let's jump into that. Just a really quick refresher on what the differences are between these two programs. So the first one, PLC, so your price loss coverage, is truly that. It's a floor for each of these commodities. Corn has a floor of 370. I must be really struggling with this laser. That doesn't want to show up on that one. There we go. Corn is a 370. Soybeans is an 840. So if we fall below those prices, that's when a price will trigger, right? The program will trigger a loss. And again, 840 on soybeans. As we all know, that's quite a ways away from where the market's at. So PLC on soybeans probably not going to be even a great solution just because we're not even close to those levels on PLC. But corn, again, if we decide to go with SCO for your crop insurance, the 370 is the floor that you get. So let's just take a look at how a loss would actually pay out. In this example here, we're going to say we have a 100-acre base of corn, and we have a FSA yield. So we're not updating yields this year at FSA, you're just updating your elections, and you're going to be doing that every year for the next 3 years. Because prior time we signed up for 2 years, now every single year you get to make a change if you so choose. So if you do PLC on corn, and let's just say we have 167 as the yield that we have on file for this farm number at FSA, our reference price again is 370. Let's just for this example say we come in at a 360 for a price for the crop we just grew. We're not even close to that number, but let's say it is. If we did, we'd be 10 cents short, times the 167 bushels, times 85% of the base acres. So it'd be 85 acres there. As you can see the payment, and if you divide it by all base, that's what you'd get if PLC would trigger a loss. Now, just FYI, FSA currently is tracking, the last WASI report had corn tracked for the crop we just grew at $4.30, and beans was at $11.15. So we're significantly higher than those payouts. So don't expect either of these programs to pay anything for the 2020 crop year at this point. If you choose County ARC, that's an area-based plan again, so it's based on the county yields. One thing I want to point out, so the discovery, this price I was talking about, the 430 and the 1115, that price discovery started back in September and went through August, or goes through August of 2022. So we've got quite a bit of time before that final price is set. But until that takes place, that's what we're going to be going with, is what they update on the WASI report every single month. Just a quick example of one of the reasons why the county ARC programs are really not as attractive as they have been in the prior years. First thing is we got to look at the way they determine the county yields and the county guarantees, and then also what we call the spring price for county ARC. So this is an example of the county I'm in. This is Faribault County, Minnesota here. So the last 5 years, we've had some pretty good yields, but they do what they call an Olympic average. We take out our low year, which was in 2018. We take out our high year, which was 2017, and we average the middle 3. So the county's APH, essentially for county ARC, is 216 bushels to the acre. But if we look at the prices, it does the 5-year look back as well. And as you can see, every single one of those years is below $3.70. So for that reason, they give us a plug of 370. That same floor that we have with PLC is the floor we get with county ARC. So our floor, basically our spring price for county ARC is going to be $3.70. We're crop insurance, we're trading right now in that 452 range, so significantly lower than the market is. So if we just do the math here, we take that 216 times the 370 gives us $801. It's an 86% policy, essentially is what the FSA County ARC program is. That would give us a $689 an acre guarantee. For comparison, let's see, what kind of a loss would we have to trigger anything in county ARC? I put in 170 bushel corn for Faribault County. That would be 46 bushels below the APH. And I put in that 420 that we're tracking for the crop we just grew. If that happened, we'd still come in $24 above triggering the first penny of loss. So the takeaway is these programs are not going to be very attractive not going to have a very highly likelihood of having a loss because the guarantees have been so depleted from what we've seen in prior years. So let's actually look at some of your close counties here. For example, McLeod County, 202.5 is essentially your APH for the county for corn. And I use on the very right-hand column there, I use $4.20. So again, I did these slides before the last one that came in at 430, but even at 430, it even make it worse. So at $4.20, we'd have to have a county yield for 2020 come in below 154 bushel corn, actually below 153.5 to even triggering the first penny. And I'm pretty sure that that didn't take place in 2020 for you guys. And let's just say that this is for 2021. The likelihood of seeing something in that range, we're going to have other problems in the marketplace if that so happens. So the big takeaway is just that the programs themselves have been depleted so much by having our 5-year price be brought down to a cap or a floor of $3.70. Let's look at soybeans here really quick. Similar concept. We're not floored out on soybeans. As you can see, soybeans has a price in there of $8.95. Again, the floor for soybeans was $8.40. So if we take your McLeod County 53 bushel as the guarantee or the APH times that $8.95, and our guarantee would be $409 an acre. If we use the last WASI report of 11/15, we're at 36.7 bushels we have to yield as a county in 2021 to have any chance for a county ARC loss on soybeans. Probably not great likelihood. So the takeaway is don't put any of these programs probably in your cash flow, or your banker may laugh at you and ask you to take them out, okay? The reality is we're not gonna get them probably through the ARC or PLC program for 2021 unless something drastically changes in the marketplace from where we're at today, which I'm sure all of us do not want the prices to go back to where they were. Really quickly on ARC Individual. This is a program that got quite a bit of popularity with the last sign up, especially in areas that had prevent plant. Because if you had a farm number that was 100% prevent plant, you had the ability to put a 0 yield on that acres. And so you got the max payout on those farm numbers that you had prevent plant on. Now, if you had an 80-acre field in there and you had 20 acres of prevent plant, the yield was actually off of the 70 acres you planted, not the 10 that were prevented from planting. So one of the things I like to highlight with this, because this is still not a bad program. Like on my farm, I've got one farm number that's very highly susceptible to drownouts. I'm going to put that number into this program because what's the benefit of this one is you can keep all of your base into one bucket of coverage. It does a weighted average, as we see here on the bottom. It takes what you actually planted. For corn and for beans, it comes up with your weighted guarantee. So if there is a loss, you're going to be paid. It's like in my case, it's going to be all corn this year in this farm number. So if my corn doesn't do well, let's say we get a lot of rain and we drown out a bunch, or I get green snap and my yield goes down, the yield of that farm number is going to determine whether I have a loss or not for that farm number. It still uses the same 370 and 894 for the price guarantee, so it's going to take a pretty drastic yield loss. But if there is a loss, I'm getting paid on all base acres, even though I'm planting only corn. I would get my soybean base and my corn base all lumped together, and then you're paid out at 65% of that combined base. So it's something to still consider. I'm saying it's not something I'm saying you should definitely do, but it's something to consider if you've got some farm numbers that are maybe more susceptible than the others. All right, couple key questions I'm gonna ask. So really I've been kind of staying, hey, it's a coin flip. Really neither one is gonna be good for you or not. But if you're looking at county ARC, I'm just going to point out one thing, and I know Mark's going to talk a little bit more about SCO and ECO here, so I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but if you have interest in getting what we call the supplemental coverage option, you have to sign up for PLC. I just want to point out really quickly why SCO is a significantly better product than our county ARC is. And again, to do that, you had to do SCO or PLC and FSA. A couple things to keep in mind with SCO. It's a county-based coverage through crop insurance. The subsidy is at 65%, so that's a big win for you. So it's a pretty low-cost product. But why is it better than the county ARC? They're using the same yields. Back here a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year, they changed where FSA and RMA are using RMA yields to determine the actual county yields going forward, regardless of what program you're signed up for, if it's area-based. So crop insurance, we're going to use the spring price and harvest price for SCO. Where at FSA, they're going to use the 5-year Olympic prices, which I just showed you, and they're going to use a 12-month discovery to determine out what the actual value of the crop you grew was. We're just going to look at the month of October and how did that month trade in comparison to the spring discovery month that we're in right now. Again, I already stated that we're using both the same yields. They're going to be RMA yields. And payments, even though in crop insurance think that maybe as a negative, we're not paying these out till June. That's still significantly several months ahead of what FSA would pay you. You're not going to get paid until October or November. And if you have a loss, you're only going to be paid on the crop that triggers a loss with County ARC. So if, let's say, corn triggers a loss, you're going to get paid on 85% of those base acres of corn. Soybeans would pay nothing. This would pay based on what you planted, and you're going to get paid on your planted acres, not 85% of that crop base. So SCO definitely is a significantly better product than the County ARC program. Just really quickly showing, and then probably steal some Mark's thunder here, but it's going to go over the top from your multi-curl level up to 86% is really what this is showing. And we just take your yields times that 9% or 11% band in this example to determine the value you have. But just want to quickly show you kind of how one would work. Before I showed you County ARC, we used a 170 county yield and a 420 price. I've got the same exact numbers. Again, this is Fairfield County example, but the concept would be the same across all counties. So our county expected yield is 198.9, and I use that 170 bushel actual yield. 450 spring price, kind of tracking that. 420 fall price. In this scenario, if this actually happened, SCO would pay out 50%, 56% of the liability, whereas I showed you before, we'd still be $24 away from paying anything out on the County ARC product. So I'm not saying that this is a way to go, but if you like the concept of area plans, SCO is significantly better than County ARC is. And I'm sorry, that slide. And just a little bit of history. Say Mark's going to be talking more about these, but just some look back. We have a look back tool to show how ARC and how SCO and ECO would have performed in prior years had these crop products been bought. So there's definitely more performance through the SCO and ECO products than probably the County ARCs have had in the past. Any questions for me? Otherwise, that's my.
We have one online question.
Okay.
Is the marketing year 2021 average price based on futures or national cash average price?
It is, yeah. So the question was, is the national marketing price based on futures or the cash price, the national cash price? And the answer is the national cash price. So it's not just a future month, but it is taking in a national cash basis. Great question. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I know we sold a fair amount of SCO in the past. A lot of you, this last farm bill, you were probably PLC on the corn, ARC on the beans. Again, if you switch from PLC on your corn and you go to ARC County, we have to take off that SCO. You're not allowed to be able to have SCO if you have ARC County. Next up, I think a lot of you have seen in the paper, seen on billboards, the new product called ECO. It's kind of a over the top of that SCO product. Mark Harms from Great American is going to come talk to you on the ECO coverage and the SCO coverage.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. As they've been talking about the enhanced coverage option and the supplemental coverage option. Okay. ECO, the enhanced coverage option, is new for 2021, and it's area-based coverage, so it goes by county, and it is 86 to 90% or 86 to 95%. SCO, the supplemental coverage option, is area-based also, and it covers from your multi-peril level up to 86%. ECO and SCO are sold as endorsements to your multi-peril policy. So if you have an RP, the ECO and SCO are also revenue products, where if you would have yield, they would be yield products. Here you can see how they stack up. The RP covers your yields, okay? 80%, if you're at 80% level, it will cover 80% of your APH. Remember that SCO up to 86% is a county product. ECO up to 95 is also a county product. These two products are designed to be simple. So there are no premium credits or offsets against your individual coverage. The SCO is subsidized at 65%, where ECO revenue is at 44%, and ECO yield is at 51%. Archer PLC, you are eligible to buy ECO if you have either one of those products. Sales closing, projected and harvest prices for ECO and SCO match your multi-peril coverage. Also, coverage under ECO and SCO, be it yield or revenue, follow your underlying policy. These are area plans. The expected and harvested yields are based off of RMA data. So years ago, it was on NAS data. We all got the NAS report to report your yields and stuff. Well, now it's based off of RMA. So the yields have gone up from the NAS data, was always a little lower. Indemnities aren't paid until the following summer, not at harvest time. Also, ECO, SCO, and individual coverage trigger independently of each other. So you could have an ECO, SCO indemnity with no individual indemnity. You could have an individual indemnity with no ECO or SCO. You could have an indemnity from all three programs. To buy ECO and SCO, you need to have your underlying coverage with the same company. Also, you can buy, if you buy ECO, you can have SCO and ARC or PLC, but remember, SCO is available with PLC only. Okay, here are some yields. The expected and harvested corn and soybean yields for McLeod County back to 2017. And the reason 2020 isn't in there yet is because our production reporting date isn't until the 29th of April. So RMA will release that harvested yield for 2020 sometime prior to June 16th. And immediately after that, the companies will make payments if payments are due. Also, we put Renville County in here. Same years, 2017 to 2021, just for an example for you. Okay, then, the last part we're going to go through here is ECO with an RP policy. So on those charts earlier, you could see that the McLeod County expected yield is 187.9. So if the price comes in, the spring price, if that comes in at 450, the ECO would have $845.55 of expected county revenue. If you elect the 95% level, your coverage range then is between 86 and 95, so your coverage range is 9% of that 845.55. Now, the loss is figured off of, or the payment is figured off of your approved yield. So if your approved yield is 200 bushel, we would take that times the 450 for $900, and then the coverage range would be multiplied by the $900, and the ECO coverage band from 86 to 95 would be $81 of coverage. If the harvest price is 420 and the McLeod County final yield comes in at 180, the final revenue would be 756. So now we need to determine a loss percentage. So we take the expected, or we take the final county revenue of 756 and divide that by the expected revenue. That gives us 89.4%. So we subtract that from the 95% and we come up with a loss percentage of 5.6%. Now, the next slide, we need a payment factor. So we take the 5.6% and divide it by your coverage range of 9%. So that tells us that we pay 62.2% of the $81 of coverage on the ECO. Okay? Any questions on any of this? Okay, thank you very much, and also thank you very much for your business. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Mark. We have a 5-minute break. We'll take a 5-minute break, and you run to the bathroom or something else, and then after that, I will come up. For those of you listening at home, maybe Matt can put some music on for you. You can listen at home for a little bit, and then we'll get going again here in about 5 minutes. Get going for this online people. Okay, we're good. For those who don't know me, my name is Matt Melberg. I'm an agent here at Dave Larson Financial. As you can see, I missed the memo today that I was supposed to wear the Dave Larson shirt, so apologize, everyone else got it except me. I'm an agent here at Dave Larson Financial. Like I said, I'm also a farmer. I farm with my family northeast of Hector. So what I want to talk to you today about is putting a crop insurance plan together, going through your multi-peril, going through some hail, going through some revenue protection, and where do you start, okay? Guys, you come in the office, we get a lot of guys that come in and go, what does the average person buy? It's not that simple. We can give you ranges of where people kind of go to, but everybody's operation is different. The main thing when you look at your insurance, you got to ask yourself, how much coverage do I need? How much coverage do I want? And it's easy to figure out after the fact. If you were one of those guys that got all the bad hail last year, you wanted hail through the roof, right? It was easier after the fact. But going into the season, how much should you have? Do you want to cover your cost? Where are you at? So when we look at how much coverage you need, I think before having that insurance conversation with you, you need to have the conversation with yourself and the banker, or Dave. Dave has spent a lot of time this winter doing cost reduction worksheets, all this stuff for guys, does a lot of time doing that. Again, if you need help, give Dave a call, he'll gladly help you out. But knowing your costs, where are you at? Where's your land, machinery, labor, seed, fertilizer? You know, with technology these days, QuickBooks has made it really easy to keep your cost controls. And I'm a big spreadsheet guy, putting everything down on spreadsheets, figuring out where you're at. Be consistent in, on how you get your costs on a yearly basis. You can try to cheat it and go, I can drop my seed down a little bit. I can maybe get this and that a little cheaper. Put what it truly is. Don't fool yourself. And then in the end, find your cost per bushel. I think that's the most important thing. If we would poll this room right now and we get a cost per acre on corn, we'd have a wide range of numbers. And then if I ask you, what's your 5-year average on your corn yield, and divide it by that number, that'll give you your cost per bushel. So you can produce corn cheap if you want. Cut back in your seed, space out your populations, cut your fertilizer, and you can get it down to, say, $500 an acre. But if you're only growing 100 bushel corn, you have $5 a bushel into that crop. So run a cash flow, balance sheet, cost production, do that yearly. Hopefully all of you are doing that now. Have a marketing plan. How many of you have forward contracted crops for this next year? And of what you forward contracted, what is your average price? And if you would sell the rest today, what is your average on the total? Have all that prepared. Be organized, we're going to the bank. How much should I cover? And that's the question we get a lot. Well, like I said, everybody's costs are different. Everyone has different costs of production. So where are your costs at? I like to pull Iowa State University costs up, and in 2021, they have a cost of production on corn of $710, okay? They use an average yield of 219, and with that, it comes down to 324 a bushel. The nice thing with that, we haven't had a year, probably since 12, 13, going into 13, where you can put in some numbers and the price of corn is a lot higher than potentially what your cost per bushel is. Hopefully next year is another fun year to farm. We've had some rough years in the past year. 2021, soybeans at $500 an acre. Again, your numbers might be completely different. I'm just pulling up averages from Iowa State University. Comes to $9.61 a bushel. So once you got your costs in line, ask yourself, what are you trying to insure? I can put $800 of coverage on my corn crop if I want, put it all in hail, but what did I buy? I have to get hail in order to collect. Am I trying to buy more revenue? Okay, to me, that's a big thing in our operation is how much revenue can I insure? That I'm insuring if my yield goes down or if that price drops later on. I'm insuring that. Is hail an issue? Okay, if you were in that stretch, I was in some of that stretch from that hailstorm that went through July 11th. It was ugly. I was working in the office that day in Hutch and I started getting calls about 2 o'clock. I went out, drove around. By the time I got back to the office at 5:30, I had 30 calls in that stretch of guys that had hail. Ugly stories. It was pretty ugly out in that area. Are you trying to insure more revenue? Again, you can go buy hail insurance, but again, you got to have hail in order to collect. Are you trying to insure more revenue? So if that yield does drop for any reason, or your price drops for some reason, are you covered? Did you sign up for ARC and PLC? And hopefully most of you have been into the FSA office, have not been in contact with them. You got to have this signed up by March 15th, just like the crop insurance. and have that talk with your banker. What does he want you to have? The nice thing with the way the prices have gone, and there's an adverse effect to this, I'll talk in a little bit, is we're starting at a higher price of corn. I pulled this up on the 12th, I think we're at 450, 451, somewhere like that today, very close to this. But as you can see, we were kind of in a rut from 2015 to 2020, where we were like in a 15-cent area every single year. We finally have broken through that, so we're starting out at higher prices. With this volatility in the crop insurance is also going to basically affect your cost, but we'll go through that in a little bit. So the nice thing, you'll be able to insure more dollars because we're starting out at a higher price. I pulled this slide up, it gets a little busy. A couple things I want you to look at. One, look back at 2004. Look how ugly the corn prices were. I was going through some files in the office last weekend, and I found some LDP files from 2003. You young farmers, Dustin, what's an LDP? What is that? Loan deficiency payment. That was big for about 5-6 years. Okay, the prices got high enough, and we didn't get them anymore. The one thing I want you to look at corn, and I'm not saying this is going to happen next year. So a lot of you buy revenue protection. Some of you have bought revenue protection with the harvest price exclusion. From 2020, basically to 2013, that hasn't necessarily hurt you because the price has been down. Last year, the price was up only 2 cents. But the other thing I want you to look at is look what happened in 2012, 11, and 10. Okay, we had some droughts in there. Our stocks to use were low, and we had prices surge in the fall, especially in 2012. And I'll go over an example of how that could affect you if you do take revenue protection with the harvest price exclusion. So when you look a little closer on corn prices from 13 to 20, we've had an average drop of 47 cents. Last year we were up 11, like you can see. But the other years, it seemed like we started around $4 and it'd go down about 50 cents. And we're kind of in that range for a couple of years. Last year was the first year we've been up since 2012. Beans, I think we're at 11.66 today. I think that's what I pulled up last night. Again, beans have been all over the board since 2011. We've seen 13s, 12s, 11s, 10s, 9s, and 8s. This year, fortunately, we're starting out at higher prices, so you can insure more dollars. But again, there's something I want to show you as we get into the quotes, how that's going to affect your price. Same thing on beans. A couple of takeaways. One, how low the price was back then. The other takeaway on this is you saw in corn, we had 6 or 7 years where it was down every single year. You look at beans since 2004, and I'm not saying this is a trend, I just thought this was pretty interesting. You look at 20 and 19, both years up. 2 years prior, it was down. Next year it was up, next 2 years it was down. We haven't had 3 consecutive years where it stayed the same. Okay? I'm not saying next year it's gonna go up or going to go down. I have no idea. I just thought that was an interesting trend where corn, it was going down for the last 6 years. We have had an average drop of 31 cents when we look at your beans. But again, we've had years that stayed the same. We've had years it's gone up, and we've had years it's gone down. The one thing I want to look at when you're looking at how much to insure, okay, you need to know where your cost of production is and where your insurance level is. And I pull this slide up every year. I take the Iowa State University costs and compare it to a revenue protection policy. I'm taking either the higher the spring price or the fall price. And you can see, guys, from 2010 to 2012, we had pretty good. Okay, prices were high, grain prices were high, and our inputs were starting to rise, but they didn't hit the peak yet until 12 or 13. The problem is the commodity market started to crash after 13, but your inputs didn't follow as fast. So all of a sudden now we're in 2012, you can insure hundreds of dollars more than your cost of production. It kind of fell apart there for a couple of years. You had gaps, some years over $100 gap. With that price increase we've seen this year, we've minimized that gap, and now we're looking at around a $40 gap potential, depending on where your cost of production is. We're going to show that same thing on beans. Beans, kind of the same thing. 11, 12, good. And 13, it flipped. Your cost of production all of a sudden became more than what your 80% at a 52 bushel coverage could get you. This year, you had about a $21 gap. So you're asking yourself when you're buying your multi-peril, do I need to cover that gap? Do I want to buy more insurance? And we're okay with where I'm at. So when you're putting together your policies, I like to put this chart up. Pretty crude, but I think it serves the point. So I look at your insurance as you have a toolbox. And these are your tools that you have for you. Your multi-peril crop insurance is your hammer. That is a thing that has to go in every toolbox. It is highly subsidized. and it's the best bang for your buck, bar none. That's the first thing you look at. Then, if that isn't enough for you, you want to look at some gap policies, whether if it's RPP policy, an APO policy, BAN, GAP, RAM, one of those over the top that we can potentially insure either just a yield loss or a revenue loss. Then we want to look at hail. Hail hasn't, the rates came out, they aren't really that much higher than they were in the past. Okay, you can buy hail on corn pretty inexpensively, and I'll show some quotes on that. And then look at some additional products. Prevent plant has been an issue for in the past. You can buy a 5% increase on your prevent plant. If replanting has been a problem for you, you can buy an extra replant policy on your corn crop that'll allow you to plant on the first acre and get paid. Now, when you're looking at this, if you don't decide to buy a gap policy, does that mean you don't look at hail? No, it's just another tool. You can skip one, go to the next, but I think this is the order you should look at your products when you're looking at buying them, and take a look at all of them. So when we look at your multi-peril insurance, it is obviously your best bang for your buck. At 70% enterprise unit, it is 80% subsidized. So you're only paying 20% of the bill. You can protect your crop, pricing, and yields with revenue protection. That is key. I'm a big revenue protection guy. That's the majority of what we sell in our office. But you can also buy a YP and an RP HPE policy, which there's places for that. They're cheaper, but, and I'll get into the buts in a little bit. It's highly subsidized, low cost. For a $12 bill, $13 bill, you can enterprise at 80% and have $650 of coverage. Pretty reasonable, okay? Revenue protection recovers your price and yield, and there's also nuances in there with replan and prevent plan. Prevent plan isn't something we see again. We've seen it in our office 3 times. In 14, in our office, we prevent planted over 30,000 acres that year. That was ugly, okay? Hopefully we don't see that again. So I'm gonna take some time. I got a quote up, hopefully you can see it online. If not, take a look at your packet. I wanna go through a quote and how it's put together and why pricing is what it is. So I looked at Renville County corn. The day I did this, it was $4.50. I think we're $4.52. Again, we're in that price discovery period right now. And I used a 200 trend yield adjusted yield. Hopefully you here, those at home, you are trend adjusting your yields. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and you're looking at me clueless, come talk to me. And then I also use a 190 rate yield. So those 2 yields, your rate yield is what you truly have on your farm, what your yields have truly gone in. That trend yield adjustment yield is that yield that after 2012, when the trend yield adjusted came in, it puts a factor on that corn crop. So every year you go back in Renville County, I think the factor is 2.25. It adds 2.25 bushel onto your APH. So if you go back 20 years in your database, it's adding 2.25 back to every year it goes back. So in a lot of cases, you can gain another 10 to 15 bushel. Point of this is, the bigger the spread between your trend yield and your rate yield, your insurance is gonna be a little more expensive, because you're insuring against a non-actual yield, in essence, your trend yield, but it's also looking at that rate yield, what you've actually had. The next number there, I put 500 acres. And how that comes into play is your enterprise unit. So when you enterprise, I believe it's 800 acres. The more acres you put in the quote, up to 800, the bigger discount you get. So I kind of put a minimum rate or minimum range in there of 500. The next thing is the volatility factor. And we maybe haven't talked enough on the volatility factor in the past, but that's a component of your rate and how you're getting charged for crop insurance. And it's dependent on how volatile the markets have been, right? So our markets have been very volatile, and that's being established right now too. I have a 0.23 ratio in there. I think it dropped to 0.22. The higher that number, the more expensive your insurance is. So when you look at last year, I think we were 0.17, 0.18, somewhere in there, we jumped quite a bit, is why your insurance is gonna be a little bit more expensive. The next thing we wanna look at is the gray bar going across, and we're gonna look at the different types of insurance. So you have revenue protection. That protects your yield, that protects if the price goes up, and also protects if the price goes down, okay? Kind of the trifecta, it's the best one out there. Then you look at the revenue protection with the harvest price exclusion. That protects you on yield and only protects you if the price goes down. If the price goes up, you don't get that new revenue guarantee like RP does. And YP is yield protection. Underneath that, you're gonna see EU and OU. Your EU is your enterprise unit. So that's all your, let's say, corn in that county as one unit, and there's discounts because of that, if you do it that way. and the other one is optional units. That takes it section by section. Okay, so then we're gonna go down on the left, and let's scroll to the 80% line. So you're at 80% multi-peril insurance. Again, we're using that 200 trend yield adjusted yield. Our guarantee per acre is 160, so that's if you have a yield loss, YP, you won't get paid till you get less than 160. If the price drops $1.50 in the fall, it does not matter with YP. You only collect on that yield loss. It has to drop below 160 in order to collect. You scroll over a little farther, you see the guarantee of $720. That's your revenue guarantee for revenue protection to start the minimum at least. And that's what you would have for revenue protection, no matter what the price does. If it goes down in the, or up in the fall, that's what it stays at. So when you scroll across a little farther, we're gonna look at RP. You have a price on the enterprise unit of $12.53. And as you go up and down that line, you can see basically from enterprise to optional, it almost doubles the cost. But the thing I want you to realize is whether you're optional or enterprise, you still have that same $720 of coverage. Okay, that coverage doesn't go away. It's just how they figure that loss. The next thing I want you to look at is we're going to go to the next line, the revenue protection with the harvest price exclusion, is at $7.82. That spread, that gap between revenue protection and RP is wider than it normally is. The cost difference in 2012 from RP to RP-HPE was less than $3. It's gone up, okay? One thing to notice, I'm not suggesting this, especially this year, but if you are bound and determined to buy RP-HPE, one thing I want you to look at is if you were normally 80%, I would want you to look at going 85 EU, and that's $15.24, okay? You get another $45 of coverage. But again, if that price goes up in the fall, then you don't get that new revenue guarantee. But if you do the math, if you were gonna buy 80 RP compared to 85 RP-HPE, the price would have to go up 25 cents for you to be wrong. That makes sense. Okay, next thing we got ECO. We talked about ECO. I think there's some, we've had a lot of calls on this. People are excited about it. So when you look at ECO, it's the same cost whether it's at 70, 80, 90, or 85. It doesn't matter. Why is that? Because it's looking at 86%, and I quoted it up to 95%. So no matter what coverage level for your multi-peril you have, it's going to be the same cost. So you're looking at $25.96 for $81 of coverage. County-based product. Then you scroll down and you see SCO. SCO covers from where your multi-peril ends, so at 80%, up to 86%. Again, county-based. So the more levels you jump, your SCO gets continually cheaper, $7.23. The one thing I look at when I'm buying insurance is I look at my coverage every time I go up. So if I'm going RP at 80%, it's $12.53. It's going to go to $24.72 to jump. So it's going to cost me basically $10 to get $45 of coverage. My rule of thumb is I want at least a 3-to-1 or more. Where we don't start seeing 3-to-1s is where yields are lower and you're not getting as much guarantee on top and the prices are fairly similar. So on multi-peril, at least you want a 3-to-1, if not more. Beans, I'm not going to go through quite as thorough. If I use Renville County, 1156, 54, 52. 500s, the volatility factor on beans is a little bit less, 0.19. Go down to that 80%. We're at $9.98 for RP and double for OP. So you look at putting your plan together, obviously you need to decide, is optional or enterprise an option for me? Am I satisfied with that? Or if I'm not, what is the thing that is it telling me not to do it? And if it's hail, like on beans, you can buy $150 of Comp 2 Plus for that difference. So when you look at your packages together, am I better off at 80% enterprise unit with 150 of hail? Or do I want to just go optional and it's $24? Basically, the same dollars of revenue coverage, but you'd have that $150 for the same cost, okay? So let's dive in a little deeper to the differences between RP and YP. I mean, obviously you saw there were some big price differences, but I want to go over what can get you. That's my job here. If it goes bad, what can go bad? Well, YP again only protects your yield. It's cheaper than RP. And there's places for YP. Some of your organic guys that have contract pricing. If you're growing seed beans and you have a contract price that's really high, YP might be okay for you. But if price increases, that YP, if you have a loss, that doesn't increase. So use YP if utilizing contract pricing through your crop insurance, like I said. RP versus RP-HPE, and like I showed you before, we've had a lot of years where it really hasn't been much of a difference. You could have saved some money. This year, I think, is different. I'd be very scared to go to an RP-HPE policy this year. It's tempting, it's cheaper, the gap is wide, it's a couple months more or less. You could have weather issues, and that's one thing. If you look at the drought monitor right now, there's a big drought here coming up, southern United States. If that continues, we could see prices rally in the spring. And we're starting with a higher spring price with a high volatility. This is something we always tell you at every meeting that you come to. Multi-peril is the best bang for your buck. Utilize your multi-peril. The second thing we always tell you is purchase something that gives you the ability to collect. Don't come in and say, I want a 70% EU policy. Bottom line, what are the chances of you collecting? When you go from 70 to 75, it's the cost of $2 to $4 or $5. It's pretty inexpensive. Buy something that gives you the ability to collect. So let's look at an example where YP was the wrong thing to do. We're going to revert back to 2014. That was the year we prevent planted over 30,000 acres in this office. That was the year that it sucked planting. It rained, it never dried. It just wasn't fun. We had tons of PP in our area that year. We had extremely poor yields. Some of the fields that were planted in the end, maybe they should have been PP, the way it looked. Prices fell. The problem was we were in the crap spot of the nation, but the rest of the nation had a pretty good crop. Prices fell from 462 to 349 in the fall. There was a big difference if you had YP that year, how you got paid out. So we look at RP, you have a 206 bushel APH, 80% coverage, use that 462 price, you had a $761 guarantee. YP, it's all bushel based, right? So you take that 206 times 80, you need to have 164.8 bushel or less in order to collect. Now, fast forward to fall. In this scenario, I used 175 bushel average. There was a lot of yields that were less than that this year. We saw 100 bushel corn come in that year. It was ugly in spots. Which policy would you rather have? Well, in this case, YP paid you nothing because you didn't have below that 164 trigger. For RP, I looked at your bushels that you harvested times that fall price, and your revenue to count was $610. Take that off your guarantee, you got $150 an acre. This is where YP could go bad. Now, even worse, okay? And again, I'm trying not to scare you. I'm just trying to show you what can happen, okay? Because when it is the thing that can happen and we get the call, it's never fun. So you look at RP and RP-HPE, they work identical when your prices go down, okay? Prices go down, they work the same. But RP-HPE, you don't get that higher price if it goes higher in the fall. This can be very dangerous. 2012 is a prime example to this. There was a poor crop and prices rallied into fall, big time, okay? Benefits of RP-HPE, it's less expensive and it works identical if the price goes down. What if it doesn't? In 2012, farmers in Indiana faced a drought. There was a lot of 100 bushel corn. I think that was their state averages that year. Prices in the spring went from $5.65 to $7.50. You assume a 200 bushel APH, they took 80% coverage. How would they have fared? In the end, let's look. Your RP, you got a guarantee of $1,200. Well, how did you get that? Because you get that higher price in the fall. You take your 200 times your 80% coverage times the 750, you got $1,200 of coverage. The RP-HPE doesn't work like that. You keep the spring price. Your guarantee is $904. Assume you were one of those guys that harvested 100 bushel corn. How did you get paid? Here's the bad part. So $1,200 guarantee minus your $750 revenue to count, you got $450 an acre. The guy that had RP-HPE had a $904 guarantee, revenue to count is $750, had a $154 payment. Now, like I said before, that spread has widened. That year, there was a $296 difference per acre in payment, and the cost of the two products difference was $2.84. So be very cautious. If you're gonna buy that, know what you're getting into. That could happen. So we've got your multi-peril kind of covered. You know what the products are. You know what your costs are, hopefully. Is that enough? And do you need more above and beyond that? So we're going to look at all the companies that we deal with. And I have some of the products that the most popular ones. All these companies have more products than this, but I want to talk about maybe some of the more popular ones. Now, when I say that, some of the products are similar. They aren't identical, some of your private products. So for those of you that bought an RPP last year through RCIS, Rain and Hail has something similar called RPO. For those of you who bought BAN last year from Armtech, which is now rebranded as Agrisampo, that has, our FMH has RAMP, and also Great American has GAP. Okay, so there's multiple products, they all work maybe slightly different. And we're gonna go over how some of those would work and how you can maybe put them on top of your multi-peril insurance. So the first one we're gonna look at is Price Flex. We sold a lot of this several years back. And the problem with your multi-peril insurance is you're in a price discovery period right now. So the month of February for December corn futures. We're at that 452 somewhere range for our average price for the month. It might change a little more, but that's probably kind of where we're gonna end up. And we also have a fall price in October for December corn futures, okay? But what happens when you have rallies well before your spring or midsummer that you can't capture with your crop insurance? So you look at last year, we started out at a 388 price, ended up with a 399. So the observer from the outside goes, well, there wasn't much volatility, but we had a little bit of a summer rally. What Price Flex allows you to do is pick additional price discovery periods for your crop insurance, one or many. So you can buy an additional $1 worth of coverage on your corn and $2 on your soybeans, okay? So when we look at it, and I just pulled up something from last year. Again, we were at that 388 price. In the fall, we ended up 399. But you see, in the summer, we had a rally. So with Price Flex, it allows you to buy an entire month, the first half of the month, or the last half of the month. That's how you can decide to choose your crop or choose your Price Flex program. The thing is, in July, price was up to 418. So if you would have bought Price Flex, you could have established a new price at 418, and that would have added another $30.40 worth of coverage. Kind of a neat product. The next product we're going to talk about is APO, an added price option. This is very popular on some of our specialty crops, sugar beets, some of our guys that contract, seed beans, something like that. What this allows you to do is add additional price on to what your multi-peril insurance price is. So looking at this at 75% coverage, it allows you to add 33% onto your price. Okay, so at 450, 33% more, you can get another $1.50 on your price. The thing with this policy is you have to have a yield loss. That's the only way you get paid those extra dollars. So you take a 200 bushel APH, you take it times 75%, your trigger is 150. So that $1.50 that we added on your corn, you do not get paid unless it gets below that 150 bushel. Now, to take this to the next step, let's say you wanted to cover more revenue. That was your thing. That's my thing. I like covering more revenue. These yield products are nice, but I want to cover more revenue. For those of you that bought RPP last year, this next product is similar. Okay? I'm going to use the word similar. It's revenue protection option. What it allows you to do is add another 50 cents on the price of the corn and $1.20 on the price of your soybeans to your spring price. Okay, so if we're at 450, let's say, it allows you to go to jump your spring price automatically to 5, and that's where it's at. So if you wanted to add it to your fall price, you need to buy the harvest price option. So that's very important. A lot of these products have that harvest price option on it, where if you buy this without the harvest price option and you add your 50 cents onto it, but in the fall price goes to 550, it doesn't carry with it. You got to buy that harvest price option with it in order for it to carry. So you look at a 200 bushel APH, you take that 50 cents, it's a way to get another $80 of coverage. So if you had a 40 bushel gap or $40 gap, you wanted to get over your cost of production, good way to get another 80 bucks an acre over the top. RAMP, sold a lot of RAMP last year. Again, if you were with Armtech, BAN is similar and GAP is similar, we use those terms. So what this allows you to do, it works pretty much just like your multi-peril insurance. The nice thing with RAMP allows you to take a different unit structure than what your underlying multi-peril is. So again, if that's one thing that it makes you nervous, you want to enterprise your units, you want to take advantage of those discounts, I want to buy that 80% because it's only 12 bucks comparative to 24 if I go optional, but I'm worried if I have some shallow losses over the top, okay? This is the product that might work for you. So you can have that underlying as an enterprise, and your over the top ramp coverage can be optional. And what it allows you to do is buy up to 95% coverage. There's some caps on how much you can insure at that level, but it allows you to go up to 95%. Last year, we sold a lot of bands of coverage from 80 to 90. So when you look at this example, this individual person bought 85% multi-peril insurance. They bought that 10% band through ramp, got them up to 95% coverage. Kind of a nice product. For those of you with sugar beets, we insure a fair amount of sugar beets in the, through our Southern Minnesota, through our agency. There's a wind freeze crusting policy. A couple of different companies have it. This one's probably the cheapest. When we look at the wind freeze crust, it pays indemnity on a direct loss to sugar beets if you have wind, freeze, or soil crusting. So if your populations are down, this will potentially help pay for it. There's a maximum liability of $500 an acre, and they want you to put half of the value of your wind freeze crust policy in a hail policy. And for beets, hail is pretty inexpensive. So you look at McLeod County, Renville County, it's $4 a hundred. You add that hail on top, it's maybe $5.25 per hundred. Pretty reasonable. The last thing we want to look at for some additional add-ons is the ECO and SCO. So we had a presentation on it, right? We had two guys talking about SCO, a little bit on ECO. ECO is your enhanced coverage option, and SCO is your supplemental cover option. Very important, they are county-based. So if you were one of those guys that got zapped with hail last year, and again, we don't know the yields that are coming through our county, but I highly expect SCO will not pay out next year on corn or soybeans in the county. So you might have had a field that went 0, SCO will pay you nothing, okay? More than likely. ECO, you can go up to from 86 to 90 or 95%, and you got to purchase that by March 15th, like we talked before in our presentation. So you look at why ECO, and I'm just going to look at ECO by itself. Okay, I'm going to look at Renville County at 210, 200 bushel rate yield. I'm looking at ECO. There's an expected county yield. So every county has an expected yield. Renville County is 189. Okay, so that cost from 86 to 95 is $25.88. Now, let's look at something else. Again, how to put your money maybe somewhere else. And I just used ramp, for example. We could use band, we could use gap, we could use RPP. We could use any one of these add-on products to kind of substitute what this would cover. Again, I used a 90, 85, 90% band coverage, and I used it as optional units. And with FMH going up to 95%, they cap you at $50 of coverage. But a product similar to ECO for optional units is $22.32 an acre. Now, to get more dollars for dollars, I went 80 to 90, which gives me $90 of coverage, $29.11, based off my farm, not the county. Hail, kind of a sore subject after last year. I know our area it's large, and we have probably a radius of 200 miles that we insure. For those that didn't see it, July 11th, there was a storm that came through the afternoon from Candioi County down south of Winthrop. Ugly. Areas that you could adjust from the pickup. There was a tree grove south of Stewart Equipment. You guys see the grove. July 20th, there was not a leaf on the tree. Ugly. Wiped out fields. Truly could adjust fields from the inside of a pickup. This is just a picture of hail. Again, this, if you look in the background, there's mountains. I just pulled this off the web. I wish I would have taken more pictures, but this field actually looks good compared to what was out there last year. So hail, private product, not subsidized. You can purchase in the growing season up to 2 hours prior to the storm. Okay, you can have small deductibles compared to your multi-peril, basically none if you want. Hail accounts for approximately 6% of all losses through crop insurance. Nice thing is covered on an acre per acre basis. There's lots of options, lots of different policies at all different prices. It provides protection up to the actual cash value of the crop, and you can increase coverage during the growing season, which is kind of nice. Hail also insures all these other things, and I was asked, once, how much have you paid out in the past? And I talked to Rich Hupp, one of our former adjusters, and he told me stories about every one of these. For me, I've paid out collision overturn a vehicle that we've paid out, and the vandalism on 2 different occasions for me. One, the guy's cattle got out, ran through his field and kind of made a mess. And then the other one was some high school kids decided to do some crop scouting through a cornfield when it was tasseled and they drove end to end. So that was covered also. So if we look at hail products, we're going to look at a couple different options, and there's a ton of different hail options, all dependent on how much you want to spend and where your deductible levels are at. So we're going to look at a basic, Comp 2 Plus, and an excess 10 IP, and I'll explain how each one of them work, and the costs and deductibles are all different. So this chart is from 2017, but it's relevant to what we're going to talk about. So you go to the top, you see the different columns of basic, Comp 2 Plus, and the excess 10 IP. So I put $100 an acre for the liability for each one to make it apples for apples. And then we look at the premium per acre. The basic's $140. And how basic works, it pays you 1-to-1 up to 70%, and there's an escalator. So if you follow the chart on the side, you see the percent of hail, and you follow it over to the right, that's what you would get paid out per acre if you had that hail. Comp 2 Plus, a little more expensive. This is, I would call more of the Cadillac version of the hail. Costs $2 a hundred, a little more expensive. But the nice thing with Comp 2 Plus, it pays you 1-to-1 up to 10, and after that, it pays you 2-to-1. So at 55% damage, you maxed out your policy. And then the excess 10 IP, where the first 10%, it pays you nothing. And then it starts paying 1-to-1 up to 70, and then there's that escalator in there. So we always get the question, well, what should I have bought? If you truly just looked at it and I bought $300 of coverage last year, and then you calculated the price, what it cost you, this is basically how you think you would come out. So the shallow losses, you were better off buying basic. Even though Comp 2 Plus starts paying you a little more, it's more expensive. So those shallow losses, just looking at $300 an acre across the board, that was the best. From there to 87%, the Comp 2 Plus was the best. And then from 87 and up, obviously the excess 10 IP. But let's look at it a little bit different, guys. Let's assume you were going to spend $6 an acre. What did a lot of guys buy in their corn hail? $300 to $400. I think that's kind of a range that a lot of guys buy. So let's say I was going to spend $6. What could I get with each one of these products in that township that I quoted? And again, hail is quoted in every township has a different rate. So you get down and say Martinsburg Township gets pretty expensive. You get over in by Mayor, by the water tower there, I have a gentleman that buys insurance from us. His Comp 2 Plus rates are almost 4 times cheaper than the guy in Martinsburg. And when I tell him it's cheap, he still thinks they're too expensive. Okay, so you look at basic with that $6, you can get $428 of coverage in this township. For Comp 2 Plus, you get your $300, but look at your excess 10 IP, you get $850. Now, if we all know what hail we're going to get during the year, it makes hail insurance pretty easy to buy. You know you're going to get wiped out by a whole bunch of the cheap stuff. You can actually buy a 30% deductible that's cheaper than the 10X IP. But again, 70% of hail damage, 70% of hail is less than 30% damage. You never know if you're going to get the doozy. So let's look at this a little different. I charted it out looking at different levels of hail damage. Okay, what would have, just spending that same $6, what would have paid you more? Now the chart gets a little busy. If you go to the next slide, it shows you. Well, the first 0 to 17%, you were better off spending that same $6 on basic. After that, there was a small window. Comp 2 Plus was better. But after that, 23% up, you were better off loading up with the excess 10 IP. But again, at the very beginning, the first 10%, you collect nothing. Okay? So you can collect $550 more if you would have got wiped out spending the same $6, but you never know how much hail you're going to get. The one thing we like to do in our office is potentially mix and match your hail. And why do we do that? Well, we want to give you the ability to collect, but we also want to give you the ability, if you get the doozy, you get the pounder, that you can collect a lot of money. You know, if you get a 5% damage on a hail claim, you're going to get some money. It's probably not going to kill your operation. But if you get that 50% one or 60% one, it can cause a lot of damage, and we want to make sure you're covered. So I looked at spending that same $6. We're going to spend that same $6. We're going to take those same 3 coverages that we had, but then we're going to mix and match some. We're going to put some Comp 2 Plus and some excess 10 IP together. Why? So you have some coverage up front if you get some hail, but if you get the doozy, you have a bunch of cheaper stuff on the backside, that's going to pay you more. And the same, I took the basic and the excess 10 IP, did the same there. We got $642 of coverage. So we want to look at mix and matching your products. Now, when you chart it all out, looking at the cost, and then looking at where the payments would be, the chart gets a little busy, especially in that 10 to 20-some%. It's hard to tell which one's going to be the best. When you look at it, you break the numbers down. From 0 to 15% was probably the best thing to buy. Looking at $6 of coverage and how much coverage you got. From 17 to 37, it was better to mix basic with 10x IP, which a lot of you do. Okay, a lot of you do the basic and the 10x IP. Then after that, it was better to buy the excess 10 IP. Again, look at your hail coverage. Maybe potentially mix it up to give you something that's going to pay up front, that doesn't break the bank, and then go on the backside and maybe something with a little higher deductible to cheapen up your product a little bit. So we had tons of hail in 2020. It's fairly inexpensive on corn. It's a little more on soybeans. A lot of times double to 2.5 times more. If you're enterprise your units, you're taking advantage of that price. So at 80% enterprise unit, it was $12 and some odd cents. Optional is $24. Take a look at buying hail over the top of it to cover that. That's the thing that gets you on the farm. Take a look at buying the hail. With the markets increasing, this is a good way for your bottom line. We look at a lot of your add-on products. I'm going to get into that a little bit, some quotes. All the prices have increased. Hail really has increased. Okay, you can buy a lot of hail insurance for $6-7 an acre. So we took a look at your hail. We took a look at some of the add-on products. We took a look at your multi-peril. What other add-on things could you buy that maybe aren't too expensive, maybe you didn't know about, something that you could throw on your multi-peril or your hail policy? Late plan option. For those of you that maybe got out there late and it's now June 1st. On June 1st, you have a decision made. Do you want to prevent plant or do you want to keep planting for corn? Okay, if you plant after May 31st and June 1st, you start taking a 1% reduction per day on that farm. Okay, what the late plant option does, gives you another 10-day window. So if you get planted late, it still gives you your same guarantee during that first 10 days of June for corn. There's an extra replant option. I think this is sometimes underutilized. With your multi-peril insurance, you have a replant policy on your policy. Okay, so you have to meet the 20-20 rule. You have to have 20 acres or 20% of that unit drowned out. So let's say you had 300-acre fields and you planted 18 in each one of them and you were an optional unit. You collect nothing for replant. If they're enterprise, then you would collect. What this product does is allow you to plant on that first acre. Okay, and with corn, you can buy up to $50 an acre of coverage. Costs about $1. Not too bad. Wind green stamp endorsement, if you buy a bunch of hail on corn, potentially look at wind and green stamp. It gets a little spendy, but there's areas that they have it on every single year. And there's a way for your prevent plant coverage. You can add on another 5%. Who wants to talk about prevent plant? Hopefully we never see that again. So looking at our plans, obviously I've thrown a lot of information at you. We have a lot of products to put towards you. We have a lot of companies to work with. We have tons of options. How do I place all this together to make sense now? For us, like I said in the beginning, there's no cookie cutter design. There's not one plan to go, well, this is what the average guy's taking it. Here you go. When guys call in and go, well, just do what I did last year. That's my pet peeve in insurance. I don't want to do that. Let's go through your policy. And maybe in the end, it is the same as last year. But let's look at other options. Excuse me, I take a drink of water. You got to ask yourself, how much risk do you want to take? When you look back, do you have a gap in your insurance? Are you okay with that? Once you maxed out where you thought your multi-peril should be, were you okay with that? Or do you need more coverage? Look at buying revenue protection. I think I've given you some examples why. But if the price increases, you are protected. So we're going to look at some corn ideas. First off, multi-peril. You look at southern Minnesota, the average guy is 80 to 85%. You look at the charts that we get through crop insurance. I'm going to say our average guy in our office was probably 80. I believe that's going to go to 85 this year. Okay, and we'll talk about that why. I would look at using RP. Okay, so using 190 bushel APH, spring price of $4.50. We're slightly higher than that. 80% EU, $12.83 an acre. Pretty inexpensive. Now, if you want to go some gap coverages over the top, remember what I talked about that volatility factor. On a lot of these products, that volatility factor is in their price, so we're seeing some increases in those add-on products. They're getting more expensive. So I quoted ramp. I mean, there's a lot of different products we could use, but that's the one I quoted. To get another $86 of coverage, $27.50 $1.81, and that gives us another $86 of coverage. Then we look at hail, okay? So what I did is looked at $400 of hail, and I took half basic and half 10 XIP, $4.40. Pretty reasonable. Okay, so you have total revenue coverage of $770. So that protects you if the price goes up, price goes down, or your yield, and total coverage of $1,070. So this is what I consider more of your Cadillac line of insurance. It gets $45 an acre. It gets a little spending. So why do I think some guys are going to go 85%? If that price scares you, okay, look at jumping just to 85%. At 85% with the hail is $28. So your multi-peril will go from 12 to 24. You're going to get another $40 of coverage, let's say, of revenue coverage. Plus you can get your hail on over the top for less than a $30 bill. Or if you want to downplay it more, look at 80% EU, throw your hail on $16.93. Pretty economical. Soybeans, same way. Again, southern Minnesota, a lot are 80, 85. I believe we're going to see an increase in that because of where our prices have been, because of the drought outlook, because of a lot of different factors. And now we have some money in our pockets, guys. It looks better for next year. It looks like it's going to be fun to farm. So at 54 bushel APH, 1156 price, pretty inexpensive, 998 price. If you optional unit, take that times 2. Gets you pretty close. Look at purchasing some additional gap coverage over the top, whether it's ramp, band, any of these over the top for another $62 an acre of revenue coverage. Again, and buy the harvest price option if you can, $19.76. Look at buying some hail, $150 worth of hail, costs you about a Comp 2 Plus on your beans at $10.65. We could cheapen it up with some basic or some other stuff, but I used Comp 2 Plus. Gives you total coverage of $673, cost of $40.39. Again, if you're looking at scaling back, looking at jumping to 85, so that multi-peril would cost you around 20, and you got your hail at 10 for a $30 bill. Okay, and if you go down to 80%, you're about $20.63. Not too shabby. So when you look at your insurance, like we always said, buy something that gives you the ability to collect. Okay, look at the enterprise and option. If you have not ever done that before, if you're new to us or have never been with us, if you don't know what this is, please come and talk to us. This was a game changer a few years back. Make sure you trend adjust your yields. If you're a beginning farmer, there's some discounts there we can get you. Make sure we look at that. Let's look at all the hail plans. Let's look at potentially mixing some of those up. Look at some of those additional private products. Look at some of those multi-peril stuff we can throw on the side too. Most importantly, buy something that gives you the ability to collect. Let us help you devise a plan that would work for you. Now, you're going to look at this slide and go, why the heck do you have Mike Tyson up on a crop insurance slide, the guy with the face hedge? How is he relevant at all to crop insurance? Well, he said something one time that is relevant to crop insurance, believe it or not. The same guy that has the face tattoo, the same guy that bit the ear off of this dude in a boxing match. Okay, dude's crazy. But he said something at a press conference. He was going to fight Peter McNeely. Peter McNeely was this big, tall guy from out on the East Coast. He told the reporters he had a plan. He had a plan that he was going to beat Mike Tyson. And when those reporters came to Mike Tyson and said, he's got a plan, he's going to kick your butt, Mike Tyson told them this: everybody has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. And how that's relevant, last year that July 11th storm punched a lot of people in the mouth. Okay, the rain that came south of Hector, the 7 inches of rain and 7 inches of rain, punched a lot of people in your mouth. Help your crop insurance. Let your crop insurance soften that blow. That's all I got for you. I talked long enough. Does anybody have any questions? We got a couple online questions. All right, what do they got?
So the first online question is, max RP increase in the fall is $2 on corn and $4 on beans from February spring average for lost payments.
For price flex?
No, for max RP increase for fall was $2 on corn and $4 on beans.
Revenue protection.
So what, like, if the price were to go up or fall, what is the window?
Oh, it's the question was what's the price limit on RP? How much can go up? Double. It can go double. It can't go more than double.
Okay. And then the other question from online is, what did price flex cost in your example?
The price flex I did in my example, and again, price flex varies on a day-to-day basis. And if I would have bought that example in December, let's say, it would be cheaper than if I would have bought it in that month that it was up that high, because then it's a known. They know that I would have $30 more coverage. When I'm quoting out price flex now, looking at the July time period, $6, $7. Okay, do we have any other questions? All right, sounds good. Next up, Dave is going to come up and he's going to talk about planning. Dave does a lot of planning with growers in our office, a lot of cost reductions, all that kind of stuff. And Dave's going to go over some ideas for you when you're looking at your crop insurance and in your farm plan.
I think Matt and I, when we were putting our plans together for what we talk about today, we were pretty similar in our thoughts. I think when you are building a crop insurance plan for the year, there's a lot of moving pieces. And we're coming out of a year where we were really scared last year. We were very scared. We had a 2.1 billion bushel corn carryover. We had a projected growth of 1 billion bushels. So they thought we were going to have 3.1 billion bushels of corn at this time. And we were afraid that we were going to have a 2 in front of our corn number, not a 5 in front of our corn number. What happened? Well, probably some misinformation from the government. I don't know, but maybe. Anyway, big change. If I took a poll today and I said, how many of you believe that corn could drop $1 by fall? How many would say that could happen? How many think it could go up $1? Good. That's why when we're looking at these products today, I think Matt looks at revenue. I look at revenue and I say, since this is our 11th year. I don't know where that time went, but this is our 11th year that we've been in business. And in that period, the most losses that we've had have come from revenue drop. That's where most losses have come from. And if we are concentrating on how to protect ourselves the best, then let's look at that and try to protect for that. So I'm talking about building solid risk management plans, very similar to what Matt was talking about. You got to know your cost of production. Okay, knowing your cost of production. Matt got into that too, but what I do is I've got it broke down so that you put your numbers next to it. You're going to say, well, Dave, your numbers are bullshit. That ain't mine. And the truth is, that isn't yours. This is probably an average for our area. But put your numbers there. Do it. Then you'll know what your cost of production is. How many of you know what your cost of production is? Raise your hand. It's a good idea to know that because then we can insure. Then we can do a good job of insuring. We also know what we've got to sell for to beat that price so we make money. So you put your cost down, know what your APH is. Know what that number is. What is your APH? And then come out with a break-even cost per bushel. No, there's profit in that analysis. If you said, well, my land costs, I'm making a land payment. Well, you probably paid some principal, didn't you? That's profit. Then my machinery, I made a payment on my machinery. Well, there's principal there, that's profit. And then I took a living out of it, that's profit. So if you said, well, that's really my break even, no, it's your cost break even and what it costs you to farm. So put that number down. I put a sample marketing plan here. I've written a couple articles this past year in our newsletter about using your multi-peril as your marketing tool. Okay, if you buy 85% coverage, I can sell 161.5 bushel and be covered. Now, if you thought the market might double, from $4.50 to $9, well, then there might be a little risk in that. But I don't think it's ever happened. So if you said, okay, I'm going to sell 161.5 bushels and I'd like to sell that for 461 or whatever your price is that you're planning to get, well, then you can guarantee yourself a profit with crop insurance. And you know that if you didn't raise the crop, you could go out and buy the bushels to make that happen. When you look at beans, didn't do the same on your soybean crop. Do it on all your crops. Do it on your sugar beets, do it on your edibles, do it on all your crops. Why? So you know where that break even is and know how to insure it. So we do the same thing, and I put a marketing plan. I guess Matt was talking about getting punched in the mouth. I think about if you don't have a plan, then wherever you end up is where you thought you'd be, right? Because you didn't have a plan. So whatever happens, happens. You just deal with it. But I think it's better to have a plan. I think it's better to sit down, try to figure it out. What are the risks that can happen to me? How can I put together the best, most cost-efficient plan that works? And I do think you should have a marketing plan. I think, yes, we're lucky. If you did market your crop this year and you're getting $5 a bushel, congratulations, I'm happy. But for the previous 5 years, if you didn't have a plan, you got killed. So, so that's how I look at it. Let's go back to my meeting with your agent. Now, I always think there's a third and a third and a third agents. There's a third of your agents that really know the crop insurance. They know it so well. They know how to put together a plan for you. They understand all the products. And I think a third of the agents are like that. I think there's a third that are order takers and just want to make money. And I think there's a third of the agents that are poor. And they don't know the products. And the first thing they'll say is, how about the same as we had last year? Let's just do the same as we had last year. We don't do that. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we look at each year as an individual. Is this year way different than last year? Sure it is. It's way different than last year. We can project a profit this year. Last year, we're scratching our heads. So, meet with your agent. Meeting with your agent is important. It's your chance to get your APH data in. Need to make a tighter plan than just throwing grenades at it. I think Matt and Larson too, we're all committed to, and Craig, we're all committed to buy the best bang for the buck for you. What is your best deal? How do we ensure you the best and how do we make it right? Step 3, I have your MPCI is your main building block. Well, that's the same as Matt said. It's the same thing as Matt said. Matt said it's the crux of what we do. I guess this year I look at it and say, okay, we're going to start with a fairly high price. There would be some chance if we grow a monster crop in this country that the markets would fall. That seems to be the most chance that we've had to collect in the past few years. So I would say, buy the 85% this year, go up, yeah, I know it doubles. I know it goes from 12 to 24 bucks. We'll pay that extra 12 bucks, so you got that extra coverage. And then maybe not look at that over the top product. Don't spend the extra money on that. Buy the 85 and look at that and make that make sense. It's the highest subsidy of dollar amount. Yes, it's not on a percentage basis, but the dollar amount's your highest subsidy. So go ahead and take advantage of that and make that work for you. So if you're hearing me, what am I saying? I'm saying 85% is a good deal this year. Probably look at that. Keeping tabs on your APH. I don't know if you've ever, if you go through your APH and you look at all your deals and you see all your history, and then let's say that you've changed, probably got 20 farms in there that you don't run now. And for some reason, somebody else rented it, or you let that one go. Time to clean all that up, time to go through there and say, I'm not running this one, not running this one, not running this one. And clean that up so we can have the highest, that if you do rent an extra farm, then we have our highest yields that we can put on that farm. We've done that a lot for you guys, but if there are in your APH based stuff that we don't run, let us know that. Trend yield adjust, Matt talked about that. Matt and I went out on crop insurance where we go out and we were prospecting and talking to people, and we went in and the guy says, what is trend yield adjust? He didn't know. His agent had never even talked to him about it. And the losses had been so great with him that, what was it, about 3 pickups that he lost, man? 3 brand new pickups that it cost him not having trend yield adjust on his deal. So understanding how your APH works, looking at it, making it make sense, that, and that's our job too. I know you count on us. I know you do. But we need to go through that and do it together so that we know what we have. Understanding the endorsements. Well, Matt did a wonderful job talking about the endorsements. And last year, I think they were more important than they are right now. I think 85% can cover most of us to make a profit. And look at that, and that's the best bang for the buck. So as you're looking at buying the additional products, and it doesn't mean that you won't, but look at that and see what that costs. How much are you willing to spend? On my budgets, I had $40 for crop insurance. What I was projecting, they were a little bit higher for the 85 because the volatility was a little higher. It's dropped a little bit now. I think it went from 24 down to 22% on corn, and I think it was 21% dropped to 19% on the soybeans, which changes the cost of it. But it also changes the gap products too. As the volatility drops, they get a little cheaper. One endorsement that I don't think we take a very good advantage of is the replant. And it costs, Matt talked about it, it costs $1. And that product then gives you that additional $50 and covers in between that 20/20 rule. Now, if you're an enterprise unit, let's say you farm 1,000 acres of corn and you have drownouts, you only need to have 20 acres total in the county. It can be 4 acres here, 6 acres here, 8 acres here, so on and so forth. Then you meet your 20/20 rule. But what does it pay? Well, it pays 8 bushels of your price times your price selection, which would be $36. If you buy that $1 product over the top per acre, that gives you an additional $50. And then once you met your 20/20 rule, you get $86 to replant, which would cover your replant costs of putting your crop in. Is it important to have every acre of crop this year? Sure it is. We can sell it at a profit. We can make money. So making sure that we've got every acre covered is a good thing. So look at that, ask about that, ask how much does replant cost and what's available to me. Matt talked about buying the hail coverage over the top. I guess I believe, and I've always believed in this. My dad, I think it was 81 and 82. I was working in Farmington. I was a loan officer. And my dad called me up in the morning and said, it's hailed. Oh, it's bad. So I jumped in the car and I ran home and I said, well, Dad, we can adjust this one from the car window. There ain't nothing there. It's gone, 100% gone. And so he replanted. He got some crop. Not a very good crop, but he got some crop. But he had $300 for the hail insurance, and back in 81, that's a lot of money. And he said, next year I got another call. He called me in the morning again, and he says, well, we've been hailed out overnight. Well, this one was really bad. It took the paint off the buildings, wrecked the shingles on the house and the sheds. My dad was using my pickup for a seat pickup, and the back sides of the mirrors got hit so hard from the hail that it broke the glass on the other side. So it was bad hail. And that one was easy to adjust to. You could do it from the window. Well, what that taught me is it can hail, and it hadn't hailed on our farm in 30 years before that, so it can hail. And it's probably our greatest chance for loss. If you said, we had Paul Douglas speak, I think 5 years ago. I think Paul Douglas spoke 5 years ago, and he was talking about how storms had changed, and that the storm peaks were getting taller and taller, and we were talking about 40,000 feet storms coming in. Well, one thing about that, when it does storm, it's from 40,000 feet you get hail. And it seems like the last 5 years, we've had lots more hail here. So maybe looking at a hail policy, if you've never invested in one, might be. What I quoted in the packet, you can see there's some quotes there, and I quoted 85% multi-peril, and I quoted some hail. And I believe in VXS 10IP. VXS 10IP is the combo. That's half basic and half excess 10IP. And it's cheaper, and it pays pretty good. I also have thoughts that maybe if you wanted to buy a larger amount of insurance, maybe just look at the basic, and if you doubled your amount, it doesn't cost very much more than Comp2 Plus, but you would work like Comp2 Plus. So if you said, well, I usually buy 300 of Comp2 Plus, I think I'd like to buy 600 of basic. Just that little bit might only cost you $1 more to do that. And then if you did have a big whooping storm, like we did down south last year, you get covered. And I think we learned something about that. I also think in the hail products that if you're west of Redville County line and you're out in that flat area, then take a look at buying wind policy. Now, you don't have to buy wind on every acre. If you separate your policy into two pieces, you could buy wind for 200 on your basic, and then you could break it up and buy no wind on your excess 10IP. But you could look at wind. Wind in RCIS costs about $4 a hundred, and we do sell a fair amount of it. We sell some in southern Minnesota, we sell some out west, and we sell some down by Mankato. So I guess with that, I'm concluding. I do want to say thanks for coming today. I hope that you take something home from this, and thanks. Thanks for your business.
Thank you, Dave. One thing that Dave talked about, this is our 11th meeting we've had at Dave Larson Financial. And those of you who've been here in the past, we've had pretty good speakers in the past few years. And this year stays the same. This year we have Darren Newsom here with us. I'll find my little sheet here. Darren was formerly with DTN for 30 years, experience analyzing commodity markets, covering grains and oilseeds, livestock, energies, metals, etc., and understanding the different characteristics of each. He has appeared on numerous financial television programs to talk about markets. He is a great analyst on the Iowa Public Television Market to Market. He is a market columnist and technical analyst blogger who has been featured on websites and in magazines for decades. Newsom is well known, speaking internationally and providing the unique analytical observations and years of experience in market outlook and how markets work in an entertaining and informative manner. Please welcome Darren Newsom.
All right, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And I also want to say thank you to Dave, to Matt, and to everyone for the opportunity to visit with you today. A lot going on in the markets. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions. We've saved times for those of you online, for those of you here. There will be time at the end. I'm going to mostly talk about corn and soybeans today. But if you have questions on other markets, I'll be happy to visit about those as well when we get to the end. Or if you have questions about anything else, that we've got going on in agriculture, or anything that we might talk about today, I'd be happy to talk about that as well. Also, when I give a presentation, I'll ask you questions. So don't be surprised if every once in a while I stop and I say, okay, what do you think? I like that feedback. I like to be able to visit with you like that. I'm gonna get this started by doing just that. What word is missing from this, not gonna say title, but this first page that you've come to expect from an analyst or commentator this time of year during the travel season that is winter, when everybody gets together? What is it that they want? They want an outlook. They want an outlook. But as Matt talked about in his presentation, think about what Mike Tyson said. The great philosopher, Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan. Everyone has an outlook. There's hundreds of folks like me running all over the country in the winter, giving market outlooks. Those things are valid right up to the point they get punched in the mouth. Or right up to the point they're done talking, because the markets change. Now let's go back to something Dave just mentioned about storms. The storms have changed. We've all seen it. They seem more severe. Their peaks are taller. Same thing's about to happen in the markets. Everybody know what's coming down the road on March 15th? What's March 15th? What's that?
Sales closing.
Sales closing. I did hear Matt mention. March 15th. That's more of a coincidence, because the biggest thing that's going to happen, at least market-wise, on March 15th, is the CME is more than doubling the position size. Non-commercial or fund traders or speculative traders, whatever you want to call them, they're doubling the position that can be held in ag commodities, most notably corn, soybeans, and wheat. We saw this before. Anybody remember when? 2005, 2006. Right after the passage of the Energy Policy Act of 2005 that went into effect in 2006, the CME and the CFTC increased position limits then. And what happened? We saw the fundamentals of the market change. We saw the demand market for corn begin with the RFS program, with ethanol, a new demand pulling on same supplies or growing supplies even. The market skyrocketed. Corn went up, soybeans went up, wheat went up, even the livestock markets followed suit. Agriculture changed. It changed to the point where everything rallied so much, including wheat, that it broke the wheat market. Merchandisers refused to pay. Basis collapsed. It brought with it variable storage rates. We're still dealing with that in the wheat markets today, in the winter wheat markets. We've seen storage rates change for corn and soybeans because the volatility of the market has changed, because the nature of the markets has changed. And we're looking at that same situation coming on March 15th. Okay, so instead of a market outlook, I'm going to be talking about markets, because I have given a lot of market outlooks over the years. You may be familiar with some of these if you happen to attend some of my previous meetings, previous years. And look at these wonderful titles that I was able to use over the course of the years. Are the good times really over for good? It's the end of the world as we know it. That was one of my favorite. I don't remember what year we came up with, what year I used that. A changed paradigm. Demanding times, if not for. And then last year's 2020 vision, which anyone that gave an outlook last year, about this time last year, by the time we got into late February, which is where we are, to early March, when everything broke loose on the global stage, market outlooks meant nothing. So everything changed. But I was reminded of a couple stories as I was putting together and listening this morning to what Matt and Dave had to say. Matt was talking about LDPs. A lot of folks probably don't know what LDPs are, but they were included in some of these discussions as well, when it looked like markets might be headed back to loan deficiency payment levels. I remember a column I wrote for an in-house magazine at the time. I was actually surprised when they printed the title that I came up with for the piece, LDPing Our Pants. They did run that title. I was kind of happy about that one. The other story that I'm reminded of is I was at a private breakfast meeting in New Orleans at Commodity Classic, and the host, and this was, again, late in the seasons, or not the seasons, but late in the list, when I was putting together all of these types of extremely bearish outlooks year after year after year. And he came up and said, okay, we're doing our meeting a little bit different. We have walk-up music, like in baseball, when you have walk-up music, theme music, whatever the case might be. And he goes, I've got the perfect one for you. Didn't tell me what it was. He had the perfect one for me. And so, did the introduction, music started playing, the Imperial March from Star Wars, which is also known as Darth Vader's theme. And they were very happy to have that as I took the stage to give another gloomy market outlook. So what are we looking at this year instead? We're going to look at the markets. And when I was doing this, when I was putting this together, I realized it has been a year to the exact day, the last time I was in front of a live audience. An exact year. So out of all of the titles that I thought of, and I did think of a number of titles for this, I came up with what a difference a year makes. Matt touched on prices. We're going to go into that as we go forward. But just think about where we were a year ago in late February, where we were and where we are today. One of the possibilities for a title before I came up with what a difference a year makes was The Sun Also Rises. And it has to do with this quote from Ernest Hemingway. In the book, "The bulls are my best friends." I translated it to Brett. "You'll kill your friends?" she asked. "Always," he said in English and laughed. "So they don't kill me." We are looking at unprecedented times, or at least unprecedented in that we have not seen this scenario in years, if not decades. When we look at the commodities, when we look at the commodity complex as a whole, we are looking at a scenario we're not used to. A bearish analyst like me, and those of you who have seen me on television know that I always had this reputation for being bearish. I was simply talking about what the markets were showing us. Bearish means you always think the markets are bad, always think they're going to go down. Bullish means just the opposite. You think they're going to go up. The markets are going to improve over time. Newsom market rule number 6 is in the spotlight right now. The sun is shining bright on Newsom market rule number 6, and that is fundamentals win in the end. We don't always see this. So often we are watching markets that are heavily influenced by factors outside fundamentals, supply, demand, so on. But as we are early in 2021, we are in a situation where fundamentals are in complete control. I'm going to say complete control right now for a number of different markets. Here's just a possible list, or not possible, but a partial list. The 3 kings of commodities. And when I talk about commodities and the 3 kings of commodities, I look at the lead commodity for each of the major sectors. Gold in metals. Even though I had to put a bit of an asterisk by gold. I'm not a gold bull at this point. There is a chance gold could go up if the US dollar stays weak. And right now, all we're hearing is that interest rates are supposed to stay down for what, 2023 through 2023, something like that. So if that stays the case, the dollar should stay weak against global currencies. And with all of the uncertainty in the financial markets, gold could stay bullish. I still think gold could break down a little bit because I'm actually a dollar bull. I think the US dollar could start to go up. But crude oil, what benchmark price did we just hit recently?
60.
Exactly. We just topped $60 for the first time in over a year. Crude oil has skyrocketed to over 60. What's behind this? There's a lot of rumblings about what's pushing crude oil market, but when we were late 2020, I can't remember if it was October, November, the OPEC Plus group, not just OPEC anymore, but OPEC Plus, because that draws in Russia as well. But they decided the prices were too low. So they proposed a series of production cuts. And these production cuts are going to last through April. At the same time as the global economy, we have copper on the list, the global economy is expected to get better. So we're seeing copper skyrocket. Also, that's providing support to crude oil at a time when OPEC Plus has cut their production. So we've got all of these things coming together. How about corn? Corn is one of the most dynamic markets out there right now, but so is soybeans. And it's the next one on the list that I actually chuckled about. It's not often I can put wheat on a list of the most bullish, fundamentally bullish markets in the commodity sector. But that's what we're dealing with this year. Again, subject to change, particularly in the case of wheat. It's mercurial at best. It likes to change its mind. But for now, as of this morning, wheat is still bullish fundamentally. Then we get into cotton, same story. Lean hogs, live cattle, not right now, but out in the distance. When we start to see these smaller placements begin to impact the type of supplies that we have, particularly if global economies, particularly the US economy, starts to improve, and we continue to see strong demand as we get into grilling season. Right now, who else grilling outside right now? Yeah, February in Minnesota is not known as a grilling season. I've had the pleasure of being here a number of times, and I've never seen anyone grill in February, but I'm sure it happens. But we are going to be moving into grilling season. So we're going to see increased demand at the same time in cattle that we could start to see some supplies get smaller. Fundamentally bullish. And I talked about copper. Copper is the one market that's kind of held out as the indicator for global economic growth. When copper's going up, global economics are expected to be bullish. When copper's tanking, which we've seen many times, global economics is supposed to be headed south. Right now, copper continues to rally like so many other commodities. It's just an incredible time. Again, it's an incredible list, and this is just a partial list. I'm sure there's some markets that I forgot to add to it when I was putting that together. Now, I want to compare where old crop soybeans are today versus where they were a year ago. Because again, I said exactly a year ago today, I was in front of a crowd. He was in Spencer, Iowa at that time, and it was doom and gloom. I mean, it was tough, and the road ahead didn't look much better. Some of the key points: cash market average price at this time last year was $8.46. Implying stocks to use. I know Matt mentioned stocks to use. That is, if those, let me ask this question. Some of you probably know what question's coming. How many of you follow USDA reports? A few hands go up, that's fine, that's fine. I never have. I find more entertainment than information from them. I get more entertainment than information from them. And so what I do is I calculate stocks to use without knowing the unknown, without knowing the variables that we can't know, which is total supply, total demand, and so on, which is what USDA tries to do every month. And so what I do is calculate the stocks to use, and the stocks to use is the bottom line supply and demand number. If you ever want a quick Reader's Digest version of whether or not a report is bullish, bearish, or otherwise, calculate the stocks to use. You take ending stocks divided by total demand. The higher the number, the more bearish the report. Lower the number, obviously, the more bullish report. Maybe I got that backwards. Higher is more bearish, lower is more bullish. Now, as I said, I calculate stocks to use without knowing demand and without knowing supplies. And I do that by looking at the cash market. Last year, soybeans, $8.46. at this point in the marketing year. And this implied stocks to use for soybeans for the 2019-20 marketing year of 13%. At the end of the marketing year, when we got to August, cash price was $8.35. That was the average daily price, and implying 14.5 stocks to use, which was a record high. I don't know if it was record, but it would have been close to record. I might have missed that. Yeah, I think it was close to record high. Export shipments this time last year, just over 1 billion bushels, and final shipments came in at 1.65. March 2020 futures were $8.90, which put it in the lower 37% of its price distribution range. And here's where I get my fundamental read. I don't really look at USDA reports, but I look at the future spreads for the price difference between futures contracts of a given market. That tells me what the commercial side, talk about non-commercials being able to expand their position limits, but the non-commercials let me know what the real fundamentals of a market are by the spreads, by the price difference between these contracts. And last year, we had a 9.5-cent carry. So the March contract was 9.5 cents under the May contract, which put it at 53% calculated full commercial carry, which is borderline neutral, leaning towards bearish. And it was just coming out of, we had just seen that spread, or the nearby future spread in soybeans, leaning, not just leaning towards, but actually in bearish territory. So soybeans were bearish, but they were fundamentally bearish, but we're starting to climb out of that hole. We were seeing it. We were seeing the change in the soybean market this time last year. Still not bullish, but they were getting just not as bearish as they were before. So what about this year? What difference do we see this year? Cash market right now averaging $11.12. And what I'm looking at is a national cash average index that I have on my, that I follow every day. It was $11.12. Look at what this implies for stocks to use. 0.8%, not 13%, not 14.5% from last year, 0.8%. The only times we've been this tight was back in 2007-8 when we averaged averaged $11.73. Index stocks to use, my calculation was 0.5%. You won't see that on the USDA report, but it was 0.5%. And then, of course, the big one, 2013-14, when we averaged $13 and some odd cents, and the stocks to use was as low as it could possibly be, 0.1%. Does anyone remember what, maybe I have it up there so you can cheat. No. Does anyone remember what USDA's final stock index stocks number was in 2013-14? 92 million bushels. Less than 100. Only time ever. USDA was less than 100 million bushels. And the interesting thing was, we went from monthly report to monthly report, quarterly stocks to quarterly stocks, and it was never even implied that it was that tight, despite the fact the market was showing it all along. Future spreads were showing it, the cash market was showing it. USDA never admitted to less than 100 million bushel until the final quarterly stocks report. When all was said and done, we moved on to new crop. And that final September 30th quarterly stocks report, number came in at 92 million bushel. It was interesting. Market didn't know what to do, but the cash market had been telling us all along. Okay, onward we go. Export shipments through January. Right now, sitting at about 1.8 compared to last year's, just slightly over 1 billion. We have shipped an incredible amount of soybeans. USDA is projecting demand of 2.25. We're almost there. And we're not even 6 months through the marketing year. At this calculation at the end of January, we were 5 months through the 2020-21 marketing year. March futures, $13.07, almost $5 higher than the March futures last year. March to May future spread, where we had a 9.5-cent carry last year, we have a slight inverse this year. So in other words, March soybeans are higher priced than May. May is higher priced than July, July to August, so on and so on. You can look at a table of future spreads for soybeans, you can't find a carry anymore. This tells us we could possibly be in a record tight supply and demand situation for soybeans. So much different than where we were a year ago. How about corn? Cash market average last year, 364, implying stocks to use of 12.3, finished the year at 335 and a 12.8%. Total export sales through January were 935 million, that should be million bushels. 935 billion would be extraordinary. But that was million bushels, and we've had a final reported of 1.7 billion bushels exports last year. March 2020 futures, 378, which put it in the lower third of its price distribution range. And the March-May future spread was showing a 4.5% carry. Again, that was still considered bullish. That's why I made the argument back then, going back as far as the fall of 2019 and all the way through the early winter of 2020, the corn was actually more bullish fundamentally than soybeans. All we had to do was read the market. Did it change? Yes, but back then, a year ago today, it was different. But where are we sitting today? Where are we sitting in the corn market now? Cash market average price over $4. And this implies stocks to use of 11.5%. So it's not as dramatic as what we see in soybeans, but it's still tightening. And the implied stocks to use 11.5 puts us in range of 2013-14 when it was 11.3%, and 2007-8 when it came in at 10.4%. Total exports right now, almost 2.3 billion bushels. We've seen extraordinary sales again. USDA is projecting about a 2.6 billion bushel export demand. So we're well on pace to hit that. In the March 2020 futures, 539, almost 540 when I put this together, which puts it in the upper 4% of its price distribution. So it's moved from the lower third to the very upper percentages. Huge swing in just over a year. And the March-May future spread also inverted as compared to last year, indicating the corn market fundamentally is bullish. Commercial traders pushing nearby contracts against deferreds, trying to source supplies to meet demand. Incredibly bullish situation. So much different than where we were a year ago. So what changed? What changed in soybeans? One word: China. It's nice to have them back in the market. After months of record export shipments, China basically drained Brazil of available supplies through August. And so it was at that point when we started to see the attention turn to the United States. The latest WASDE estimate pegged old crop Brazil stocks at just over 20 million metric tons, as compared to the record, as compared to the previous marketing year of almost 29 million metric tons. Think about that. That was demand. That was where all of the ships were coming out of. They were coming out of Brazil. Nothing was coming out of the United States. Brazil's total exports for 1920, 92.1 million metric tons. The U.S., 45.8. Not even half. Not even half. Chinese import demand was reportedly 98.5, and that's expected, or projected, I should say, to increase to 100 million metric tons this marketing year. Here's one of the charts. Here is the chart that I put together for that. And there's some interesting points that I want to look at. Notice that we were, up until the drought back in 2010 through 2013, U.S. and Brazil basically on even ground. U.S. was actually ahead, clear over on the left-hand side. The U.S. exports are in blue, Brazilian exports are in green, and Chinese import demand is the red line. Then all of a sudden we continue to climb as as Chinese demand continues to grow, exports from both major countries, US and Brazil, continue to climb. But Brazil's is climbing ever so much more, just slightly more than the US year in and year out, until 2016. Then we start to see a larger jump. Then in 2017-18 marketing year, we saw the trade war put in place, and look what happened to US exports. US exports fell off a cliff, while Brazilian exports exploded right up through 2019-20 with Chinese demand. Even during that little dip in Chinese demand, when African swine fever broke their demand market, US still going down, Brazil's exports didn't really suffer. This year, we're seeing an increase in demand for US soybeans, and it has certainly helped by getting the US back in the market. Number one, because Brazil ran out of beans, but we are just now in their harvest, so we'll see how long this extremely fast pace of US exports continues. Do we slam the door on it? I don't know. It's possible. It's possible China could turn its attention back to Brazil, but the future spreads, again, are not indicating that to be the case. Future spreads remain bullish for now, meaning we have a longer term, fundamentally bullish market in soybeans. So what about corn? It goes back to something I believe Dave just said. It's been something I've been talking about for a long time. For the last 4 marketing years, we can go back and I can show, again, based on what the cash market was showing us versus what USDA's numbers were showing us, government was overestimating. There was a systematic overestimation of US stocks the previous 4 marketing years. So we saw an accumulation effect. It grew and it grew and it grew and it kept this weight on the corn market, but yet the cash market was telling us things are different. It's not as bearish as what the numbers are suggesting. I go back to 2019, whatever the production numbers were, it was a ludicrous number given all of the flooding that we saw. 2018, weather problems, 2020, COVID, everything else. Ludicrous numbers. They didn't fit with what the market was showing us. And so, right now, as we look ahead into towards the end of the 2020-21 marketing year, the 3 legs of U.S. corn demand has been better. Let me put it this way. They have improved versus where they were, at least where they were estimated a few years ago. Feed demand. We've seen huge numbers on feed numbers over the course of the early part of the 2020-21 marketing year. However, those numbers are expected to come down as placement numbers have been decreasing. So we could see feed demand start to back off a little bit as we work our way through the marketing year. Ethanol demand. Ethanol demand was holding together relatively well at this point last year. Then everything broke loose across the globe. Driving demand went to 0. We actually saw crude oil. Remember what happened to crude oil? What happened to crude oil? It went negative. I've been in this business for 30-some years. And the joke always was, didn't matter if I was talking about wheat, pork bellies, whatever the case might be, whatever bearish market there might be, 0 was always the bottom. We found out last year that's not the case because crude oil went below 0. We saw it drop below 0. First time I had ever seen it, obviously, in my career, and it was fascinating to watch play out. Of course, it shot right back up. And as we talked about earlier, it's back above $60. So about a $100 swing over the course of the year. So ethanol demand also came down. Now, this year, ethanol is expected to increase a little bit. We're still running a little bit behind as far as what we're seeing month to month. But, you know, I think we're going to at least see ethanol demand stabilize at this point. I don't know that it's going to ever get as strong as it once was because Yes, we've seen crude oil go up, but the window of opportunity in crude oil is limited. We are seeing a lot of interest over the last 4, 5, 6 years in electric vehicles. And we're seeing it just increase all the time. The demand, the push to see more electronic vehicles, all of these things. In fact, I talked to some customers from central Nebraska who haul corn into an ethanol plant, and the ethanol plant does not call itself an ethanol plant anymore. It's a feed producing plant. Ethanol is a byproduct of feed production. That looks to be the future, not now, not next year, but down the road. It looks like we're going to see more interest in the feed component than in the ethanol component. It's always kind of the nature of the beast. You know, we always knew that, like the dinosaurs, crude oil was probably on its way out. If it is, then it's probably going to take ethanol with it at some point down the road, but not this year. In fact, this year we could see ethanol demand actually increase. We could see ethanol, the program itself, prosper a bit because we see more folks driving this year. Down the road, we'll see. Export demand is the least interesting aspect really of the corn market. Usually it's the lowest level of demand. It's of the three. The other two demands steal the spotlight. But we're seeing good exports. We're seeing very strong exports right now for the corn market. U.S. corn, as I talked about, far outdistancing where it was last year, on pace to hit USDA's 2.6 billion bushels. So a look at our demand shows the blue column, I believe, is feed, and the red column is ethanol. So again, the last number of years, some of it with waivers, hardship waivers and so on, we saw ethanol demand coming down. And then of course in 2019-20, the pandemic hit. Feed demand has stayed relatively stable, kicking up here in the last couple of years. And export demand has also stabilized. But again, if we go far off to the right-hand side, it's picking up this year. So demand for corn, for U.S. corn, has been strong. We can read it in the spreads, we can read it in basis. So as we head through the balance of 2020-21 and start looking ahead to 21-22, you know, we've got some better demand going right now. We just have to keep it alive. All right, now let's turn our attention to new crop. Let's take a look at new crop. And again, I believe it was Matt talked about where the prices were last year at this point when we were calculating base price for insurance. Corn was at $3.92, I believe, and soybeans were $9. That's based on the daily closes for D's corn and Nova beans. Here's where we are this year. We've seen corn jump up, soybeans skyrocket. Right now, the ratio spread that everyone talks about, and the only real credence that I give, or the credit that I give the ratio spread, is to show what market needs what, not what's going to be planted. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But what I like to look at is what markets need as far as acres. And right now, the ratio spread in the cash market is, or excuse me, not the cash market, in the new crop futures on a daily basis is showing us in February, soybeans need more acres. The 2.58 ratio spread to corn, highest on record at this point for the month of February, at least going back to, I believe, 2001. So we've got a huge premium that November beans are building over corn. Soybeans need more acres. Getting what you need and getting what you want. Two different things. Getting what will happen, two different things. Now here's a look at the planning period. Again, going back to everyone has a plan idea. But the planning period for next spring's or this spring's acres actually starts last year, September of last year. So I run from 6 months, September through February. And the green line is the 2021 future spreads. And what we've seen over the last 6 years is, or 6 months, is that November soybeans have been running at, near, or above the highest marks over the previous 10 years. Again, making the point, soybeans need more acres. They may not get more acres this spring, but they need more acres because, again, we have an incredibly tight old crop supply and demand situation, possibly record tight. Again, we're starting to talk about what we saw in 2013-14 when ending stocks to use were 0.1%. We're now below 1% by my calculation. We're at 0.8%. We're making our way towards that. And we just saw at the end of last week, this future spread based on weekly closes only, just for the month of February, we're at 2.58. But for the entire 6-month period, we're at 2.61 based on weekly closes. That is an incredibly strong signal that soybeans, the old adages are trying to buy acres. No, it's indicating it needs more acres, that we need more soybean acres to try to bring these stocks to use, the supply and demand situation back in line. The purple line is average, blue line is the low that it's been over the previous 10 years. So again, it just shows the magnitude of how tight. I mean, because corn is tight as well. Corn needs more acres as well. And when we take that into consideration, and soybeans are still, November soybeans are still 2.6 times that of corn, it's just an incredibly tight situation right now. One that probably not going to get solved over the course of one marketing year. Again, if we look at future spreads, it's bullish as far out as we want to look, as far as fundamentally. So may not get solved. What will the acres be? As we all know, the question of new crop acres are answered by PP. End of March, prospective plantings. How many of you get excited about those? You see the slide, I don't. Prospective plantings is just what the name implies. Prospective, could be, might be, maybe. We don't know at the end of March exactly what acres are going to be, but if we follow Punxsutawney Phil, we have a pretty good idea of what could happen this coming spring. And it's something I talk about every year. I get a little bit of a chuckle out of it. But if we look at the math, it actually makes sense. The white columns, or the white rows, are when he sees his shadow. Yellow is when he doesn't see a shadow. I don't know why I've got that backwards, because yellow would imply sunshine. It doesn't make any difference. But he saw his shadow this time around. And what that implies is that soybean acres could be tend to be 3.7% larger than the previous year, and corn acres tend to decline by about 2.1%. All right, so now let's go back to this chart, where the closest previous marketing or planning period, 6-month planning period, is 2017, 2018, as far as prices go. So get back to here. In 2017, 2018, we saw soybean acres, planted acres, increase 8%. Not the 3.7, but 8%, double that, because of how tight, because of what the price was implying. We saw an 8% growth in increase in soybean acres and a 4% decrease in corn. If we look at the 2017 line, we actually see that was that odd year when both came in at 90.2 acres. Now, do I actually believe USDA's acres? No. But what the underlying principle here is that we could see soybean acres increase in 2021 over 2020, partly due to price, and of course, fill, but partly due to price, because it's implying that we need more acres, and the closest year that we have, again, is that spring of 2017. But what are some actual weather factors that could come into play? Matt also mentioned volatility. How volatility has to become a part of our toolbox, of what we use from an insurance point of view. And he's absolutely right. We have to account for volatility. Think about where we are. We're in February. February, usually a quiet time of year. Markets are usually in dormancy, like most everything else in February, but they're wild right now. And we're looking ahead to spring and summer when just naturally volatility because of weather ramps up. Here's last Thursday's drought monitor map. Not this one, this is last Thursday. And again, much of the western corn belt is still dry and even leaking over into Minnesota, northwest Iowa. We're still seeing extraordinarily dry situation. This could also change acres that get planted in 2021. The idea is, particularly over in the fringe areas, that part of the world where I'm originally from, up in the Southern Plains, that likes to pretend to be part of the Corn Belt here over the last decade or so, they may see a reduction in acres because of how dry it is. It may go to soybeans. It could go to milo. We could see corn lose some ground, lose some acres if the situation doesn't improve. Will it happen in Minnesota? Will it happen in Iowa? I don't know. The farmers I talk to mostly talk about rotations. They're not really interested in price. Most of them, as I said, chuckle when I bring up Punxsutawney Phil, indicating that they're going to plant more soybeans. Right, they're more interested in rotation. But there was one other weather event that occurred that could change that. This is a picture of last year's derecho that moved across the U.S. Midwest. And the route that it took as it just ripped across Iowa, touched the southern part of Minnesota off into Illinois and points further east. Now, as I talk to folks, the idea is that area, particularly that central Iowa area, could see more soybeans planted instead of corn because of a volunteer corn crop with all the corn that was just flattened by this storm. So we start adding all of the acres up now, from Iowa and other parts of the Midwest, the Southern Plains, and this year and that there, Northern Plains as well. And we can start to see where a switch of acres, or an increase of soybean acres and decrease of corn acres is a possibility. It's not out in left field. The U.S. loves to plant corn. There's no denying that. And we will still plant a good deal of corn in 2021. But there are issues out there that could fit into this idea that no soybeans are trying to buy acres. And then we just throw price in on top of it, and all of a sudden, the argument gets that much stronger. I talk about future spreads quite a bit. And again, these are how we read real fundamentals. Not the imaginary kind that USDA likes to release, but this is how we can see real fundamentals. And I believe I started off with corn here. Looking at the corn, March to May, or is that soybeans? They're so bad. That is corn. So the top blue box, that's the old crop, March, May, and May, July spreads. And as I talked about before, in the old crop market, when you see those red numbers, that means future spreads are inverted. That means the nearby contract is higher priced than the deferred contract. And that is bullish. There's no other way around it. When you see that on any type of table like this, it's bullish. Okay? And so as we look at the March, May, as we look at the May, July corn spreads, it's telling us the tight supply situation, strong demand situation is going to continue through at least the summer. September is that hybrid contract, doesn't know if it's old crop, doesn't know if it's new, depends on the speed of planting, depends on growth and all of this over the course of the summer. So I kind of cut it off with the last actual old crop contract being July. So we know old crop real fundamentals are bullish. This confirms that, this shows that. Doesn't matter what's on a report, the monthly supply and demand report. This is how we see what the commercial traders are trying to tell us, is that real fundamentals are bullish. But let's fast forward now, go to the bottom and look at the new crop. Okay, immediately you see, oh, there's some green. There's some green. So it has to be a little more bearish. No, it's just a little less bullish. It's just semantics, I know. But when you look at those green numbers, if they are 33% or less, going back to my old merchandiser days when I used to draw this up for customers, if it's less than 33%, it's still bullish. And we don't see right now, there's nothing really pressing 33% or more in the new crop market either. So old crop is bullish. We're going to have a bullish situation, supply situation going into the new crop as beginning stocks. And whatever acres, whatever production turns out to be, right now the opinion is, from the commercial side of the market, is going to still be bullish. And now we throw the expanded limits, daily trade limits, position limits, excuse me, from the non-commercial side on top of this, and volatility could erupt once we get to spring and summer. Soybean situation is even more dramatic. As I said, when I show you this table, you can't find any green on there. Every spread that we're looking at is in the red. This is one of the most, out of 30-some years of looking at commodities, this is one of the most bullish situations, fundamental situations I've seen. Crude oil is similar right now. I think crude oil is going to change once we see OPEC start producing again. I think that one could change. The resiliency of soybeans, though, at a time when South America's harvest is going on and China was on its week-long New Year holiday break, it didn't even cause a bump in the soybean spreads. We saw them come down. We saw the inverses weaken, but they're still bullish. We're still looking at a very bullish situation, not just through 2021, but also into 21, 22. And until this changes, until something in this table changes, soybeans are going to remain bullish, fundamentally bullish, regardless of what the argument is, more acres, better weather, this, that, whatever it might be. Until something changes, as long as this table stays red, we know fundamentals are bullish. So new crop soybeans, getting stocks could be record top. And when I say record, the previous that I've got on the books is the 13, 14, 92 million bushels, which could be taken out this year. We might not ever know it. We might not ever see it on report, but it could certainly happen. Or we could see it stabilize. And by stabilize, I mean not necessarily get more bearish, as I said, just less bullish. And it's all going to come down to Brazil's crop size, which is still in that 133, 134 million metric ton range. Chinese purchases. Will they be shipped? Are they going to be rolled or canceled? We've seen all of those play out in the past. And I'll add to this the fact that as we watch weekly export sales and shipments each Thursday when they come out, what we see is the outstanding bushels, or the outstanding sales continue to come down. So we're not making a lot of new sales right now. And this pretty much fits the game plan for the world's largest buyer, is that they bought all the US soybeans they thought they were going to need. Now they're sitting back waiting to see what Brazil's harvest does. That will determine whether or not we see them come back in as a buyer anytime soon. Because remember, even with the gains that we've seen this year, the projection is Brazil's export demand is expected to tower over US exports. Again, with China's expected to import 100 million metric tons. Future spreads are inverted, as I showed, out through the 2021-22 marketing year, meaning soybeans are long-term bullish fundamentally, meaning it's going to be very hard to break this market unless something changes. As for corn, beginning stocks could also be tight, just not as USDA is forecasting now. And here's the real interesting thing. For 4 previous marketing years, USDA overestimated US corn stocks. But they have taken a hatchet to those stocks basically since last September or October, somewhere in that time frame. So that now, if we look at what USDA is estimating, it's actually under what the cash market is telling us. So we've gone from 4 years of one extreme and we've quickly gone to the other. That, to me, is a little bit bearish, the corn market, because if they start ramping up or just edging up their corn stocks number again, with all of this extra money expected to be coming into the speculative side of corn, we could see some pressure. And those non-commercial traders already hold 500 and some odd thousand contracts of net long futures. How much more are they going to be willing to buy? Particularly if USDA starts bumping up its stocks numbers again. Demand, again, should be okay here for 2021-22. I think we could start to see it back off a little bit, possibly on exports and ethanol. I think ethanol demand in next market of the year could be a little bit difficult. As I said, it's going to be the wild card. Do we see driving come back to the point it was before 2020, or does it continue to slide, as we saw in that one chart where ethanol demand had been coming down year over year for the last number of years? Future spreads are also showing a small carry, which is still long-term bullish for new crop corn. And if corn loses acres this spring, it's going to be because of price, soybeans outdistancing them, weather, drought, and derecho from last year, and of course, Punxsutawney Phil told us we were going to lose the corn acres. All right. We've reached one of my favorite points of the presentation, and that is, what questions do you have for me? Online or here in person? Yes, sir.
With this cold weather that's gone all the way down to Texas, in the winter wheat growing area, are those areas more likely to go back to the East Coast? Are they going to go back to corn or soybeans? Or?
This is a great question. It's something that I've been tracking. With this cold blast, with this Arctic blanket that has settled over all of the plains and the Midwest, did we kill the winter wheat crop so that some of those acres are going to have to find a new home? It's possible, but we've all seen this play out before. There's a reason why I wish I had some background music now. I would have the song La Cucaracha playing in the background. Wheat is the cockroach of the grain community, the grain industry. It doesn't die. We have to kill it a dozen times before harvest. Now, this is going to be a major test, not just because of the, when you start seeing pictures of snow on the Gulf Coast outside, along Galveston, that gets your attention. Did we actually damage the new crop, the winter wheat crop that's in the field? It's possible this time of year. Having grown up in Kansas, having been a merchandiser, I always hate to be one of the first ones to say winter kill, winter kill, winter kill, and then nothing happened, because wheat always seems to come back. But it's possible they should, and to me, the real key is what happens next, because now temperatures are supposed to get much warmer. We're supposed to see a dramatic warm up with 70s in the far southern parts of the Southern Plains. So what does that do to a crop that was just stressed, some of it with very little snow cover? What does that do to the crop? And if so, if it does cause it to die, those acres, some of those acres will indeed go elsewhere. Absolutely. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your thoughts, how the new administration is going to treat agriculture?
I wrote, the question is, how will the new administration treat agriculture? I'm going to put on my dancing shoes here. I wrote a somewhat controversial, let's say somewhat, controversial is a good word for it, column on my site shortly after the last election. And I titled it The Winner. And in it, I talked about who was the real winner in the last election. And in my mind, the real winner was agriculture. I don't think we're going to see hardship waivers in the ethanol industry anymore, so we could see more ethanol demand short term. I do think we will work out trade problems with China. My hope is we do not kowtow to China, but we work out trade issues because we have to be part. We all saw what's happened with US exports, and they're coming back. Yes, we are at that crossroads right now. Are we going to continue to come back because we are actually going to take part in global markets and not be in some sort of trade fight with everybody around the world? Or was it all just short term until South America rebuilt its supplies? That's where we are at the end of February. So, last part of this is the US dollar. Current administration is keeping with the previous administration's idea that we're not going to see interest rates increases. So if we look at things like 10-year T-note, 30-year T-bonds, it looks like the market itself, traders themselves are anticipating increased or higher interest rates down the road, which could start to strengthen the dollar. If we start to see economic recovery in the United States that outpaces other countries, then we can also see the dollar strengthen. That would put a cap possibly on some of the exuberance that we've seen in U.S. agriculture of late. Long answer to a great question is I think U.S. agriculture is going to improve, but there's a lot of ifs right now, a lot of ifs that have to come through. We have to stay part of the global market. So if we can stay part of the global market, if interest rates don't take off, then I think, yes, U.S. agriculture is going to see better times over the coming years. Other questions? Yes, sir.
About the basis difference,
Yes.
is it just a regional thing, or does it, like, we've got a big livestock for hogs, and some of these bases are, even the ethanol, it's getting real narrow, but
Yeah.
Is that just a regional thing, or is it?
Yeah, it's another great question. Another key component of the market is this basis strength that we're seeing going to continue? Yes, I think so, at least for now, because what this strong basis is telling us is, again, if we look at the corn market and we look at the feed, a lot of this came early on, say in the August, September, October timeframe from the feed industry, particularly in the Southern Plains, where we saw basis just skyrocket because we had no supplies and we have all of these cattle placements going in. Cattle on feed were going up each month, so they needed feed. And so there weren't many supplies, demand was going up, basis skyrocketed. But soybean basis has actually outpaced corn basis. Soybean basis is actually sitting above its previous 5-year highs. Corn's basically worked its way back down to neutral since the big rush, since the big push in cattle has kind of flattened out. But soybean basis remains incredibly tight. Why? Because of export demand, crush demand. Both aspects of demand remain very strong. And so that's going to be the kind of the canary in the coal mine. If we start to see soybean basis come down, that means our exports are starting to slow. Now, I'm not worried about that right now. We still have some unshipped bushels to move. So I think we're going to continue to export soybeans. And if we do, merchandisers are going to have to continue to push basis, even with futures markets going higher. But if that basis starts to break down, if we start to see it weaken little by little, then that's telling us exports are likely slowing down. Crush demand probably staying strong, at least for now. I think that's going to slow down as well. So longer term, down the road, I do think we're going to see basis start to back off. But the key is going to be, if it stays strong, export demand is still strong. If it starts to weaken, then I think we're looking probably that the idea or the fact that China is starting to buy and ship its bushels out of Brazil.
Darren, we got an online question. It's just thoughts on carbon credits.
Thoughts on carbon credits. I'm going to have to defer on that one. I apologize for that. I should know the answer to that. I do not. I apologize for that. But I will, if I can get the person's name, I will certainly put something together and send it to them. I will do that. I apologize for that. Yes,
With the value of our dollar, how much cheaper are Brazilian beans than American beans in China?
the last number I saw was that Brazilian beans were not cheaper than US because they had run their supplies so tight that they had a short supply situation going into harvest. Now, at harvest, I do think it's starting to come down. Their price, because they have more available supplies now, I do think we're starting to see their cash price at port starting to come down. My guess is it's still not that much below US. And this is where it's going to get interesting. If we are still in a trade fight, then yes, China's going to look at Brazil's new supplies. If we're not, and Brazilian soybeans are above, still priced above US soybeans, that's where basis is going to tell us that we're still seeing strong demand for US soybeans. The interesting thing about the currencies is that both the US dollar and the real are incredibly cheap right now. And one of those two is indicating that it might want to go up, and that's the US dollar. Brazilian real is showing no signs of life at this point. It's still just trolling along the bottom. So at this point, I'm going to say the last I saw, Brazilian soybeans were still equal to, if not higher priced than US, but that could be changing as their harvest expands here over the last part of February going into March. And then we're going to see the test of whether or not we're actually back in the global market. Yes.
Darren, we got another online question. With attractive canola prices in Canada, how will the Minneapolis-Chicago wheat spread react through spring?
Yeah, that is a great question. The question is, with the attractive canola prices, how will that affect the Minneapolis-Chicago wheat spread? And what we've seen is the Chicago wheat market explode higher. A lot of that had to do with the drought in Russia, and they said it was a drought. Mostly, they put an export tax on their wheat. That was the rumor. And so that got everyone excited that we were going to see more business coming out of the United States. Also, we've seen reduced production here in the United States. So now in Canada, if we're starting to look at the prairies growing more canola and less wheat, I think that could spark some life into the Minneapolis contract. Will it gain substantially on the Kansas City market, not the Kansas City, but the Chicago market? We could start to see that spread come back a little bit because, as I said, it's been abnormally strong in favor of Chicago for quite some time. I do think Minneapolis could start to make some headway if Canada starts to give up some acres, and if we start to see some acres switch here in the United States, in the Northern Plains, from Minneapolis, from spring wheat to canola as well. So I would be looking for Minneapolis down the road to continue to start to gain on the Chicago market. Yes, sir.
How much effect does the safrinha corn crop have on the global corn market?
How much effect does the safrinha corn crop have, and that is Brazil's second crop? It does have an effect. And that's one of the things that's been watched closely right now in corn is the planting progress, for what it's worth. I don't put a lot of stock in planting progress numbers, but in planting progress of the safrinha crop and what the condition is, if they're breaking out of the drought, the hot dry that they've seen as they plant their second crop. Because what usually happens is, that starts to slow down some of the export demand for U.S. corn, but it's later in the season. Right now, again, if we look at the future spreads, what the market is telling us is at least through the 2020-21, the May-July spread is still strong, but it's backing off. And I think some of the sell-off that we've seen in that May-July corn spread has to do with, we saw some better conditions for the safrinha crop in Brazil. And so that's, casting just a slight shadow of a doubt over our continued pace of exports. As we work our way through that crops cycle, I think it's going to be reflected again in what we see in May, July, and what basis does longer term. But it does play a role. It does tend to slow down. It can tend to slow down U.S. business. Any other questions? If not, I will be around for a little while here, but I'll turn it back over to Dave. Again, Dave, Matt, thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to speak to you and for coming out and joining us today. Really enjoyed it. Thanks again so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for coming today. We're gonna have a meal here shortly.